Good evening and welcome back. Tonight we are going to explore the ancient world of Hercules, the greatest hero of Greek mythology, and the 12 terrifying monsters and impossible dangers that stood between him and redemption. Before you settle into the story, you can gently like the video and subscribe if you enjoy these quiet journeys into the ancient past. And if you would like, leave your location and local time in the comments so that somewhere beneath the same night sky, you can see who else is listening with you. Now, allow the modern world to grow distant. You are standing beneath a Greek night. Above you, the stars appear sharper than they do beneath the lights of modern cities. The Milky Way stretches like pale smoke across the darkness. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Aegean Sea moves against a rocky shore with a slow, repeating rhythm. The air carries the scent of dry grass, olive wood, and distant salt. A sacred fire burns before a small stone shrine, and somewhere in that darkness, a child has been born whose life will become one of the most famous stories humanity has ever told. His Greek name is Heracles. You may know him better by the Roman form of his name Hercules, even before you see him confront lions, serpents, bulls, monstrous birds, savage horses, dragons, and the guardian of the dead. You must understand something quieter and more important. Hercules does not begin his journey because he wants adventure. He begins because he needs forgiveness. His story begins with Zeus. According to Greek tradition, Zeus desires a mortal woman named Alcmene, the wife of the warrior Amphitryon. From their union comes a child carrying something dangerous within him, mortal blood joined to divine ancestry. From the moment of his birth, the child stands between worlds, and Hera, queen of the gods and wife of Zeus, knows exactly what he represents. To her, Hercules is not simply an innocent infant. He is another living reminder of Zeus's betrayal. Ancient storytellers describe Hera's anger almost like a force of nature. You can imagine it moving invisibly from Olympus, down through cold mountain air, toward the sleeping houses of mortals. One night, while Hercules is still an infant, 2 serpents appear. The room is dark. Oil lamps have burned low. The stone floor holds the coolness of night. Then comes the faint sound of scales moving across the floor. 2 snakes slide toward the place where the child sleeps. Different traditions preserve details differently, and historians continue to debate how early some parts of the legend entered the story. Yet the meaning remains remarkably consistent. Danger finds Hercules before Hercules is old enough to search for danger. The snakes approach. The infant wakes, and instead of crying helplessly, he reaches out. His small hands close around them. By morning, the serpents are dead. It is an omen. Those who hear of it understand that this child possesses strength beyond ordinary men. But perhaps there is another warning hidden within the scene. If monsters are already coming for him in the cradle, what will come when he is grown? Years pass. You watch Hercules become enormous in strength. His shoulders broaden. His hands become capable of drawing bows that ordinary warriors struggle even to bend. Teachers instruct him in weapons, music, wrestling, chariot driving, and the customs expected of a noble Greek hero, yet strength does not make him peaceful. That is one of the darker truths ancient audiences understood about Hercules. His greatest gift is also connected to his greatest danger. Power without control can become its own monster. Some traditions tell of the young Hercules striking his music teacher, Linus, in a moment of anger and killing him. Even before the famous labors begin, you sense a disturbing pattern. Hercules can defeat almost anyone, but can Hercules defeat himself? The question follows him like a shadow. Still, there are years of honor. He fights enemies, he protects communities, he marries Megara, daughter of King Creon of Thebes, and becomes a father. For a time, you might imagine the curse has passed. Picture the palace at evening. Torchlight trembles against painted walls. Servants move quietly through corridors. Outside, cicadas call among the trees. Children sleep. Hercules has a family. Perhaps, after all the violence surrounding his youth, this is what he truly desires. Not glory, not immortality, simply a home, but Hera has not forgotten him. And one of the most terrible moments in Greek mythology is approaching. The ancient sources preserve different versions of what happens next, and later storytellers rearranged parts of the tragedy. But at the centre remains the same unbearable idea. A madness comes upon Hercules, whether you imagine it as divine punishment, supernatural possession, or the ancient language for a catastrophic loss of reason. The result is devastating. His perception breaks. The familiar becomes threatening. People he loves appear as enemies. And when the madness finally lifts, Hercules sees what he has done. His family lies dead. For once, his strength cannot help him. No lion can be strangled. No wall can be broken. No enemy can be chased into the mountains. There is only silence. You can imagine Hercules standing beneath the fading torchlight, unable to understand how the hands that once protected his family have destroyed it. This is the true beginning of the labors, not a celebration of strength, a journey through guilt. For ancient Greek audiences, pollution caused by bloodshed was not merely emotional. It could possess a religious dimension. Terrible acts required purification, rituals, exile, divine commands, and sacred obligations could become part of restoring balance between the individual, the community, and the gods. And so Hercules searches for an answer. He goes toward Delphi. You climb with him through the mountain landscape as morning mist gathers among the slopes of Parnassus. Pilgrims move along the sacred road. Offerings glitter inside treasuries. Laurel leaves stir in the cold wind. The smell of sacrifice and incense hangs near the sanctuary of Apollo. Here, mortals come to ask questions they cannot answer themselves. Hercules has only one question that matters. What must he do? The oracle gives him a command. He must serve King Eurystheus. The command is humiliating. Hercules, strongest of men, must obey a king remembered largely for his fear. Yet the oracle also carries a promise. If Hercules completes the task placed before him, purification may become possible. Some later traditions even connect the labors with his eventual immortality. But Hercules cannot know where the road will end. He only knows where it begins, at Tiryns. And somewhere beyond those ancient walls, King Eurystheus is preparing the first command. In the hills of Nemea, shepherds have already begun disappearing. Paths have grown quiet. Doors are barred before sunset. And in a cave beneath the mountains, something enormous is breathing in the darkness. The first monster is waiting. You leave Delphi with the oracle's command still echoing through your thoughts. Serve Eurystheus. The words seem almost absurd when placed beside the man who must obey them. Hercules has faced warriors, wild animals, and the terrible consequences of his own uncontrolled strength. Yet now his path leads towards something that may be harder for him than battle: submission. The road south from Delphi carries you through a landscape of mountains and narrow valleys. Morning sunlight spreads slowly across the stone. Goats move along distant slopes, their bells sounding faintly through the clear air. Cypress trees rise dark against the pale hills, while small shrines beside the road remind travellers that every journey passes through a world watched by the gods. Hercules walks beneath that sky, carrying little of the appearance of a defeated man. His body still possesses extraordinary strength, but something within him has changed. The silence surrounding him feels heavier now. Ancient storytellers often celebrate the hero who returns from battle covered in glory. Hercules is walking in the opposite direction. He is not returning home to receive praise. He is leaving the life he knew because home itself has become a place of unbearable memory. Perhaps that is why the oracle's command matters so deeply. The labors will not simply test whether Hercules can overcome monsters. They will test whether a man capable of mastering the physical world can endure humiliation, restraint, uncertainty, and obedience. And the first humiliation waits at Tiryns. You approach the Argolid, where the mountains open toward fertile plains and the distant sea. Bronze Age ruins would later inspire generations of Greeks who looked upon enormous stone walls and imagined an age when heroes had walked among mortals. Even today, the surviving walls of Tiryns seem almost impossible. Massive blocks of limestone rise one above another. Later Greeks called such construction Cyclopean because they believed only the giant Cyclopes could have moved stones of that size. As you imagine yourself passing beneath those walls, the temperature changes. The sunlit road gives way to shadow. Footsteps echo against stone. Servants and guards turn toward the approaching stranger. They have heard stories about Hercules. Everyone has, and somewhere deeper inside the palace waits King Eurystheus. The relationship between these two men is shaped by an old divine rivalry. Before Hercules was born, Zeus had declared that a descendant of Perseus born on a particular day would rule over the surrounding people. Hera, understanding what Zeus intended, interfered. She delayed Hercules' birth and caused Eurystheus, another descendant of Perseus, to be born first. A divine manipulation decided a mortal hierarchy. Hercules, vastly stronger, became subject to Eurystheus. To an ancient listener, there is bitter irony here. The strongest man in Greece must kneel before a weaker king because destiny does not always reward strength. You enter the palace hall. Oil lamps burn in bronze stands. Painted plaster brightens the walls. The scent of smoke, wool, wine, and olive oil hangs in the enclosed air. At the far end sits Eurystheus. Tradition rarely remembers him kindly. He is cautious where Hercules is bold. He fears the very man he commands. Later stories even describe him hiding inside a great bronze storage vessel when Hercules returns carrying terrifying creatures. Yet Eurystheus is not entirely difficult to understand. Imagine being told that the enormous figure standing before you has divine blood, uncontrollable strength, and a history of sudden violence. Fear would not be unreasonable, and fear, when joined to authority, can become cruel. Hercules stands before the king. Perhaps every instinct within him resists what happens next. He must listen. He must accept commands. He must not simply seize the throne or walk away. The oracle has spoken, and in the Greek imagination, ignoring an oracle is rarely a small mistake. Eurystheus gives the first task. Go to Nemea. Kill the lion. The words are simple. Their meaning is not. For some time, stories have travelled from the region of Nemea describing a lion unlike any ordinary animal. Its size alone would make it terrifying. But there is something worse. Its hide cannot be pierced. Arrows fail against it. Spears cannot penetrate it. Some traditions make the creature the offspring of a monstrous parent such as Orthrus and Echidna. Others connect it to Typhon, or even say it was sent down from the moon. The traditions disagree. The fear does not. Once again, you encounter something characteristic of Greek mythology. There is rarely a single, perfectly fixed version waiting for you. Stories changed as poets, cities, families, and temple traditions retold them. What mattered was not always where the monster came from. What mattered was what happened when a hero met it. Hercules accepts the command. No argument can change the oracle. Soon the enormous gates of Tiryns stand behind you. The countryside grows quieter as you travel north toward Nemea. At first, there are farmers working beneath the sun. You smell earth disturbed by wooden ploughs. You hear insects among the grasses. But gradually the settlements become more guarded. People watch the hills. Shepherds bring their animals home early. At one small dwelling, an old man warns Hercules that the lion does not behave like a normal predator. It does not fear fire. It does not flee from men. And weapons seem useless against it. In one surviving tradition, Hercules meets a poor farmer named Melorcus, whose son has been killed by the beast. Melorcus wishes to sacrifice an animal in Hercules' honor. Hercules stops him. Wait 30 days, he says. If Hercules returns alive, they will sacrifice to Zeus together. If he does not return, Melorcus should sacrifice to Hercules as one of the dead. It is a quiet promise, but it carries an unsettling prediction. For the first time, Hercules openly acknowledges that he may not come back. Even he doesn't know whether his strength will be enough. Evening settles across Nemea. The mountains turn purple beneath the fading light. A shepherd's fire flickers far behind you. Ahead, the path narrows between rocks. You notice marks in the dust. Paw prints. They are larger than they should be. Then you find bones. The wind moves through dry grass. Somewhere higher on the slope, birds suddenly rise from the trees. Hercules stops. He listens. For several moments there is nothing. Then, from somewhere beyond the rocks, comes a deep sound. Not quite a roar, more like the slow vibration of something enormous breathing inside the mountain. Hercules reaches for his bow, and you follow him toward the darkening valley of Nemea. You move deeper into the hills of Nemea as the last daylight disappears behind the mountains. The road has almost vanished. What remains is little more than a pale trail winding between limestone outcrops, thorny bushes, and twisted olive trees. Moonlight settles across the landscape, turning the rocks silver and leaving the hollows between them completely dark. Hercules walks slowly now. His bow remains in his hand. Every few steps he stops to listen. The countryside itself seems to be warning you. There are no shepherds calling across the slopes. No bells sound from wandering goats. Even the insects seem quieter here. Only the wind moves. It passes through dry grass with a faint whisper, carrying the smell of dust, wild herbs, and something less pleasant. Decay. You remember the enormous tracks seen earlier. The lion is near for ancient Greeks. Wilderness was never simply empty land. Beyond the cultivated fields and city walls existed a landscape where human order weakened. Mountains, caves, forests, and marshes belonged to creatures and powers that could not always be controlled. The Nemean Lion belongs perfectly to such a place. It represents something civilization cannot easily contain. You imagine farmers living within sight of these mountains. Their world depends upon boundaries, stone walls separating fields, fences protecting animals, doors closing securely at night. The lion ignores every boundary. It takes livestock. It kills travelers. It turns roads into abandoned paths. And perhaps most frightening of all, ordinary weapons cannot stop it. Hercules climbs toward higher ground. From here, under the moon, you can see the dark shapes of valleys spreading below. Somewhere in the distance lies Nemea itself, a region that later generations would associate with the famous games held in honor of Zeus. Archaeology has uncovered the remains of the sanctuary of Nemean Zeus, including columns rising once again above the landscape after centuries of ruin, long after the monster vanished from belief. Sacred competition preserved the name of this place. But tonight, in the world of the myth, there are no cheering crowds. There is only the hunt. Hercules kneels beside another track. He places his hand beside it. The paw print is enormous. Nearby, scratches mark the bark of a tree at a height that makes the creature seem almost impossibly large. Then comes a sound from somewhere ahead, a low growl. Hercules rises. You feel the cool night air against your skin. He fits an arrow to the bowstring. For a moment, nothing moves. Then the lion appears. It steps from behind a ridge almost silently. Moonlight catches its mane. The animal is larger than any natural lion Hercules has encountered. Its shoulders move beneath its hide with slow, terrible power. Its head remains low, and its eyes reflect the moon with an unnatural brightness. You can understand why villagers believed no mortal could kill it. Hercules draws the bow. The wood bends. The string becomes taut. He releases. The arrow crosses the darkness. It strikes the lion and falls. For an instant, Hercules simply watches. Perhaps he thinks the angle was poor. He fires again. A second arrow hits the animal's chest and rebounds as though it has struck stone. The lion does not fall. It roars. The sound rolls across the valley. Birds burst from trees. Hercules reaches for another arrow. But now he understands the warning given on the road. The creature's hide truly cannot be pierced. Some ancient traditions describe its skin as invulnerable because of its supernatural birth. Others offer little explanation at all. Perhaps that uncertainty makes the monster more effective. No one knows why the weapons fail. They simply do. And now the lion charges. Hercules moves aside as the enormous body passes. Dust rises. Claws scrape against stone. He drops the bow and takes up his sword. When the lion turns, Hercules strikes. The blade does no better than the arrows. The edge slides uselessly across the golden hide. for a man accustomed to trusting weapons and strength. The discovery is deeply unsettling. What do you do when everything that should work suddenly fails? The question extends beyond this single monster. Again and again during the labors, Hercules will meet problems that cannot be solved by repeating the same attack. Strength must become intelligence. Courage must become patience. The lion circles. Hercules reaches for his heavy club. This weapon is simpler than a sword. Wood does not need to pierce the hide. When the creature lunges again, Hercules swings. The club strikes the lion's skull with a sound like timber breaking against stone. The animal staggers, but it does not die. Instead, it retreats. Hercules follows. The lion moves uphill toward a dark opening in the mountainside. A cave. The hero stops outside. The entrance exhales cold air carrying the smell of animal fur, damp stone, and old blood. Here another difficulty becomes clear. According to the familiar version of the story, the cave has two entrances. If Hercules enters through one, the lion can escape through the other. He studies the ground. Then he begins moving stones. One by one, he carries rocks that ordinary men might struggle even to shift. He stacks them across one opening until the passage is sealed. The lion is trapped. But so, in another sense, is Hercules. If he enters the remaining passage, there will be no easy retreat. You remember the promise made to Mallorcus. 30 days. If Hercules returns, they sacrifice to Zeus. If he does not, the farmer will honor him as dead. The warning suddenly feels less ceremonial. Hercules stands before the cave. From somewhere inside comes another growl. He could wait until daylight. He could attempt fire. He could return to Eurystheus and declare the task impossible. But purification does not offer him that road. He steps inside. Moonlight follows only a short distance. Soon you're surrounded by darkness. The temperature drops. Water falls somewhere deeper in the cave, each drop producing a small echo. Hercules runs one hand along the rough wall. His other grips the club. Then he notices something. A pair of eyes. They appear for only a moment and disappear again. The lion knows this cave. Hercules does not. Ancient storytellers leave you with a compelling uncertainty here. How much fear can a hero like Hercules actually feel? Perhaps courage does not mean feeling nothing. Perhaps it means continuing when every instinct warns you to turn back. He moves farther inward. The ceiling lowers. His breathing sounds strangely loud. Then the darkness ahead seems to move. The lion attacks. There is no room for the bow now. No open ground. No distance. Only Hercules, the monster, and the cold stone walls around them. The club rises once more, and somewhere outside, beneath the quiet stars of Nemea, the knight waits to discover which of them will leave the cave alive. The lion comes out of the darkness so quickly that there is barely time to see it. You hear claws scraping over stone. Then the cave fills with its roar. Hercules swings his club. The heavy wood crashes against the animal's head, and the force of the blow would have killed many ordinary creatures, but the Nemean lion only recoils, shaking itself before pressing forward again. There is almost no room to maneuver. The narrow chamber that protected the lion for so long has now become the arena in which Hercules must face it. Outside, moonlight lies quietly across Nemea. Inside, there is only darkness, breath, and violence. Hercules strikes again. This time the club breaks. For a brief moment, you can imagine the silence inside him. His arrows have failed. His sword has failed. Now even the weapon capable of stunning the creature has become useless. The warning heard from the villagers was true. No ordinary weapon can kill this lion, and so Hercules does something both primitive and extraordinary. He drops what remains of the club. He uses his hands. When the lion lunges, Hercules catches it. His weight drives him backward. His feet slide across loose stones. Claws tear at the ground beside him. The smell of the animal is overwhelming now. Hot fur, blood, dust, and the wild scent of a predator that has lived beyond human control. Hercules forces one arm around its neck. The lion twists. Its jaws snap close enough for him to feel its breath. Yet Hercules does not release it. He tightens his grip. The struggle becomes strangely quiet. There is no clash of bronze, no arrows flying through moonlight, only two bodies locked together in the darkness, for ancient audiences. This was the moment that defined the first labor. Hercules could not penetrate the lion's supernatural defense, so he changed the nature of the contest. If the hide could not be pierced, then it didn't need to be pierced. The monster could be strangled. Slowly the lion weakens. Its claws scrape once more against the stone. Its breathing becomes shallow. Then there is stillness. Hercules remains where he is for several moments. Perhaps he does not immediately trust the silence. Then he releases the animal. The Nemean Lion is dead, but another problem waits. Eurystheus ordered Hercules to bring proof of the victory. The hero attempts to skin the lion. His knife cannot cut the hide. The same protection that defeated his arrows remains even after death. Here, Greek tradition offers one of those small details that gives mythology its dreamlike logic. Athena appears. Whether you imagine her standing physically within the cave or arriving as a sudden divine understanding depends upon how you choose to inhabit the story. She gives Hercules the answer. Use the lion's own claw. The monster carries the instrument capable of defeating its protection upon its own body. Hercules cuts through the hide. Soon the skin that made the lion invulnerable becomes the hero's armor. He places it across his shoulders. The great head forms a helmet above his own. The paws hang across his chest. From this moment onward, the lion's skin becomes one of the most recognizable symbols of Hercules. Centuries later, Greek artists will paint it on pottery. Sculptors will carve it into marble. Roman emperors will sometimes borrow its imagery to associate themselves with heroic strength. Archaeological collections across the Mediterranean still preserve images in which you can identify Hercules almost immediately because of this single object. Yet the skin means more than victory. The first monster has become protection. Something that threatened to destroy Hercules is now carried with him. The symbolism is difficult to miss. Perhaps ancient audiences understood that trials can transform those who survive them. Hercules emerges from the cave. Dawn is beginning. The eastern sky has become pale above the mountains. Birdsong slowly returns to the valley. After the darkness inside the cave, even ordinary morning light feels sacred. Hercules begins the journey back. Before returning to Tiryns, however, he remembers a promise. Glaucus is waiting. 30 days have nearly passed. In the tradition preserving this episode, the old man prepares to sacrifice to Hercules, believing the hero must have died. Then he sees a figure approaching. At first, perhaps the lion skin creates confusion. The creature seems to be walking toward him, but beneath the hide is Hercules, alive. The sacrifice is offered instead to Zeus. The earlier warning has been answered. For now, and yet victory does not bring freedom. Hercules still belongs to Eurystheus's command, so you follow him toward Tiryns. People along the road stare at the lion skin. Stories move faster than travellers. By the time Hercules approaches the great walls, perhaps servants have already heard that the impossible animal of Nemea is dead. Eurystheus hears as well, and he is terrified. Later traditions famously describe the king hiding inside a large bronze vessel when confronted with the frightening trophies Hercules brings home. Whether this detail began as comic exaggeration or preserved an older element of the legend remains uncertain. But its purpose is clear. Every victory makes Hercules more frightening to the man who commands him. Eurystheus establishes new rules. Hercules will no longer bring such dangerous things directly inside the city. A herald can deliver the king's commands. The strongest man in Greece has completed the first labor, and instead of gaining trust, he has increased the fear surrounding him. Perhaps Hera watches from Olympus. One monster has failed, but the labors are only beginning. The next command sends Hercules away from the dry mountains of Nemea and toward a very different landscape. South of Argos lies Lerna. There, freshwater springs rise near marshy ground in historical times. The region possessed ancient religious importance, and archaeological evidence reveals deep layers of human settlement stretching far back into the Bronze Age. But myth remembers something else beneath those waters, a creature associated with poison, regeneration, and the dark places beneath the earth. The Hydra, Unlike the lion, it cannot be defeated merely by finding one vulnerable point. Cut off one head, the story's worn, and more may grow in its place, and one head cannot die at all. As Hercules prepares to leave Tiryns, another figure joins him, his nephew Iolaus. The first labor taught Hercules that weapons sometimes fail. The second will teach him something even more difficult for a legendary strongman. Sometimes you cannot win alone. Far away, mist settles across the marshes of Lerna, reeds move beneath the night wind, something stirs beneath the black water, and from the darkness, more than one pair of eyes begins to open. You leave the dry hills behind and descend toward the low country of Lerna. The landscape changes gradually. Hard stone gives way to softer earth. Streams cross the road, reeds appear beside pools of still water, and the air grows heavier with moisture. In the morning, mist gathers close to the ground, turning distant trees into pale shapes. Hercules does not travel alone this time. Beside him walks Iolaus. He is Hercules' nephew, the son of his half-brother Iphicles, and in many traditions he becomes one of the hero's most loyal companions. His presence changes the rhythm of the journey. The first labor was profoundly solitary. Hercules entered the lion's cave alone because no one else could enter that darkness for him. But Lerna will demand something different. As you approach the marshes, local warnings become increasingly disturbing. Animals have vanished near the water. People avoid certain springs. Travelers speak of poisonous breath drifting through the reeds. Some traditions even suggest that the Hydra's presence poisons the landscape itself. The creature is not simply dangerous because it attacks. It contaminates. Ancient Greeks knew Lerna as more than a monster's dwelling. The region possessed deep religious associations, particularly with mysteries connected to Demeter and Dionysus, and its waters seem to emerge from a hidden world beneath the earth. That may help explain why the Hydra belongs here. Water rises from unseen depths. Mist conceals the ground. Life and death seem unusually close together. Some ancient traditions imagine Lerna as one of the entrances to the underworld, and the Hydra guards this threshold. You move through reeds taller than a man. Insects hum around the water. Mud pulls at your feet. The smell is a mixture of wet vegetation, mineral-rich springs, and decay. Iolaus gathers wood. Hercules carries the lion skin across his shoulders. The trophy from Nemea has already become useful. The hide that arrows could not penetrate now protects him as he approaches another monster. It is the first great callback of his journey. One defeated danger has become preparation for the next. Yet the old lesson may not be enough. The Hydra is unlike the lion. Ancient writers disagree about the number of its heads. Some traditions speak of 9, others give different numbers. Later artists and storytellers sometimes multiply them dramatically. The uncertainty may be part of the creature's power. You do not need to know precisely how many heads it possesses to understand the nightmare. There are too many. Hercules reaches the place believed to contain its lair. A dark opening lies beneath tangled vegetation near the water. He does not immediately enter. Perhaps he remembers Nemea. Walking blindly into a monster's home is not always necessary. Instead, he prepares flaming arrows. Firelight flickers against the reeds. Smoke drifts low across the marsh. Hercules fires into the opening. One arrow disappears. Then another. For several breaths, nothing happens. The marsh becomes strangely still. Iolaus watches the darkness. Then you hear movement. Not footsteps. Something heavier slides across mud. A head emerges. Then another. And another. The Hydra rises from its lair. Its long body twists through the reeds while serpentine necks spread above it. The creature seems almost impossible to focus upon because every head moves independently. One watches Hercules. Another turns toward Iolaus. Others hiss into the night air. You hear the sound from every direction. The breath of the Hydra carries poison. Hercules covers his mouth and moves forward beneath the protection of the lion's skin. He raises his club. The first blow falls. One head collapses. He strikes another. Then he draws his sword and cuts through a neck. The severed head falls into the mud. For a heartbeat, the method seems successful. Then something moves at the wound. Hercules stops. 2 new heads begin to emerge. The warning was true. He cuts again. More heads appear. Every apparent victory makes the monster more dangerous. Here the Hydra becomes something greater than an unusual animal. It becomes a symbol of problems that multiply when attacked in the wrong way. Ancient mythology often gives physical form to experiences that remain familiar even after thousands of years. Some dangers cannot simply be struck harder. Some conflicts grow because of the method used against them. Hercules, the man famous for overwhelming force, has encountered an enemy that feeds upon that instinct. The Hydra lunges. Several heads attack at once. Hercules retreats through shallow water, swinging his club to keep the snapping jaws away. Then another creature enters the struggle. A giant crab crawls from the marsh. Hera has sent it. Even here, her hatred remains present. The crab clamps onto Hercules' foot. Pain shoots through his leg. He crushes it beneath his heel. According to tradition, Hera later honors the creature by placing it among the stars as the constellation Cancer. Even a small participant in a divine struggle can gain immortality in the heavens. But Hercules has no time to look upward. Hydra is still growing. He cuts another head. Again, the wound divides. Iolaus sees what is happening. The two men retreat toward the fire. Hercules looks at the flames, then at the Hydra, and an idea begins to form. If a severed neck can grow again, perhaps the wound must be closed before regeneration begins. Iolaus takes a burning branch. The orange flame throws light across his face. The Hydra hisses from the darkness. This is the moment when Hercules must make a choice that would have been unnecessary in Nemea. He can continue alone and perhaps be overwhelmed, or he can trust another person to stand beside him. There is a warning hidden in the decision. The oracle ordered Hercules to perform the labors. Would assistance invalidate the task? No one here can know. Eurystheus is far away, but Hera is watching, and kings who wish to deny a victory rarely struggle to find reasons. Still, survival comes first. Hercules raises his sword. Iolaus lifts the burning wood. The plan is simple. Hercules will cut. Iolaus will burn. Beyond them, the Hydra spreads its heads like a living crown above the mist. One head, the stories say, is immortal. Even if their new method succeeds, that final head cannot be killed. For now, however, Hercules advances. The sword catches the firelight. Iolaus follows. And in the poisoned marsh of Lerna, strength and companionship move together toward the waiting monster. You move forward through the mist with Hercules and Iolaus, and the marsh seems to close around you. The Hydra waits among the reeds. Its many necks sway above the black water, some wounded, some newly grown. Each mouth opens with a faint hiss, and the sound overlaps until it resembles wind moving through a forest of serpents. Behind you, the fire crackles. That small human flame has become the center of everything. Hercules raises his sword. Iolaus holds a burning branch. Neither man needs to speak. The Hydra attacks. Hercules steps beneath the first snapping head and cuts through its neck. Before the wound can begin its unnatural transformation, Iolaus presses fire against it. There is a violent hiss. The smell of smoke and scorched flesh spreads through the damp air, but nothing grows. For the first time, the Hydra has lost a head permanently. The discovery changes the battle. Hercules cuts again. Iolaus follows. Sword! Fire! Sword! Fire! The rhythm becomes almost ritualistic. The strongest man in Greece is no longer fighting as a solitary hero. Every successful movement depends upon another person standing beside him. For ancient audiences, this partnership offered a subtle counterpoint to the image of Hercules as pure physical strength. Even extraordinary power can require cooperation. You remember the darkness of Nemea, where Hercules learned that a weapon could fail. Now in Lerna, another assumption is breaking apart. A hero does not become less heroic because someone helps him. Yet the gods and kings may judge differently. Far away in Tyrins, Eurystheus will eventually use Iolaus's assistance as an excuse to deny Hercules full credit for this labor. That decision has not yet been spoken, but the shadow of it already hangs over the marsh. The Hydra retreats. Its surviving heads strike wildly. Mud splashes against Hercules' legs. One set of jaws closes on the lion's skin but cannot penetrate it. Again, the first labor protects him during the second. The Nemean Lion, once an obstacle, has become armor against another terror. Then only one head remains. The immortal head. Ancient traditions differ about exactly how Hercules deals with it. The familiar version tells you that he cuts it away and discovers that even separated from the body, it cannot truly die. Imagine the sight. The blade falls. The final neck separates. The Hydra's enormous body collapses into the marsh. But the severed head continues moving. Its jaws open. Its eyes remain alive. Hercules cannot destroy immortality. So he does something more practical. He contains it. He carries the head away from the water and places it beneath a massive rock beside the road. The stone comes down. The immortal head disappears beneath its weight. Perhaps it remains there forever in the imagination of the ancient storyteller alive beneath the earth, unable to escape. It is an unsettling thought. Not every danger can be destroyed. Some things can only be buried. The marsh becomes quiet. Mist drifts across the fallen body of the Hydra. Iolaus lowers the burned branch, but Hercules has not finished. He kneels beside the creature. The Hydra's blood and venom are believed to contain terrible poison. Carefully, Hercules dips the points of his arrows into it, one after another. The act seems sensible. He is transforming another defeated monster into a weapon, just as he transformed the lion into armor. Yet if you know the later stories of Hercules, you may feel the warning hidden here. The poisoned arrows will help him defeat future enemies. They will also bring suffering to those he never intended to harm. The centaur Chiron will eventually be connected to their poison, and much later, the Hydra's venom will return in another form at the end of Hercules' mortal life. A victory is becoming a curse. Greek mythology often works this way. Nothing powerful is entirely simple. The object that saves you today may wound you tomorrow. Hercules cannot know that yet. He sees only a weapon. You leave Lerna as morning light begins spreading across the wetlands. Birds return cautiously to the reeds. The poisonous monster is gone. People living near the marsh will again approach places they had abandoned. Yet the Hydra survives in memory. Ancient artists repeatedly depicted the battle, often showing Hercules surrounded by serpent necks while Iolaus stands nearby with fire. Surviving pottery reveals how familiar the image became across the Greek world. The story was not merely told, it was seen, painted on vessels used at banquets, ceremonies, and graves. The Hydra became part of the visual language through which Greeks remembered their heroic age. But the next scene takes you back to Tiryns. Hercules returns expecting another labor completed. Eurystheus hears how the Hydra died, and then comes the judgment. It does not count. Hercules had help. You can imagine the anger rising. The command never said he must refuse assistance. The monster is dead. The countryside is safer. Still, Eurystheus has found his reason. The labor will be performed, remembered, celebrated and yet excluded from the final total, requiring an additional task later. This is why the famous 12 labors contain an odd complication. Originally, Eurystheus assigns 10. He later rejects 2 the Hydra because Iolaus helped, and the Augean stables because Hercules accepted or expected payment. 2 additional labors bring the final number to 12. Hercules must accept the ruling. That may be more difficult than fighting. The man who once lost control in catastrophic anger now stands before an unjust judgment and does not destroy the king who delivers it. Something is changing within him. Slowly, painfully. The next command sounds almost gentle by comparison. No poisonous swamp. No invulnerable predator. No monster to kill. Hercules must travel into Arcadia and capture the Lernaean Hydra. Alive, the animal is sacred to Artemis. Its antlers are said to shine like gold. Its feet can carry it faster than an arrow, and harming it may bring the anger of a goddess. The challenge has changed again. Hercules knows how to kill. Now destiny asks whether he knows how not to kill. As evening settles over the roads beyond Tiryns, a strange report arrives from the northern hills. Hunters have seen golden antlers moving between the trees, always at a distance, always disappearing before anyone comes close. Some say the animal is not merely running from Hercules. Some say Artemis already knows he is coming. And beneath the first stars of evening, Hercules begins walking toward Arcadia. You leave Tiryns behind and follow Hercules north toward the high country of Arcadia. After the poisoned marshes of Lerna, the change feels almost cleansing. The air becomes cooler as the road climbs. Pine and cypress replace the reeds. Mountain streams run over pale stones, and the scent of wet earth mixes with resin and wild herbs beneath the trees. Somewhere in this vast landscape moves the Lernaean Hind. The command seems simple: capture it alive. Yet Hercules understands immediately why Eurystheus has chosen this task. The hind belongs to Artemis. The goddess of the hunt protects wild animals in the uncultivated places beyond human settlements. To injure one of her sacred creatures could turn a labor of purification into another act requiring purification. Ancient traditions describe the hind in supernatural terms. Its antlers are golden. Its hooves may be bronze. Its speed is extraordinary. Some storytellers connect it with a group of sacred deer once encountered by Artemis herself. The goddess captured several for her chariot, but one escaped and remained free in the wilderness. Whether the animal was imagined as literally magical or as a poetic symbol of sacred nature is impossible to know, but the warning is clear: do not kill it. Hercules enters the forest. For several days he sees nothing. Then, early one morning, you notice a movement between the trees. Golden light touches something ahead. Antlers. The hind stands beside a stream. For one suspended moment, the world seems perfectly still. Its ears turn toward Hercules. Then it runs. He follows. The chase does not last an hour or a day. According to the myth, it lasts an entire year. You move through the changing seasons beside Hercules. Summer burns across the mountains. Dust gathers on his feet. Autumn arrives, covering forest paths with fallen leaves that crackle beneath each step. Winter follows. Snow settles over Arcadian peaks. At night, Hercules sleeps beneath the lion's skin, and once again the first monster becomes his protection. The hide that once belonged to death now holds warmth against the cold. Then spring returns. Flowers appear beside streams. Still the hind remains ahead, always visible, never reachable. This labor demands a kind of strength Hercules has rarely needed before. Patience. He cannot simply charge forward. He must learn the animal's movements. Where does it drink? Where does it rest? Which valleys does it cross when storms approach? The hunter must begin thinking like the creature he pursues. Perhaps this is why the labor feels so different from the battles at Nemea and Lerna. There is no hatred between Hercules and the hind. The animal has done nothing wrong. It is not terrorizing villages. It is not poisoning water. It simply wishes to remain free. And so an uncomfortable question follows Hercules through the mountains. Why must an innocent creature suffer because Eurystheus wishes to test him? Greek heroes do not always receive morally clean choices. Duty, divine command, and personal conscience often pull in different directions. Eventually, the chase carries Hercules far beyond the familiar valleys of Arcadia. Some traditions say he follows the hind north toward the land of the Hyperboreans, a mysterious people believed to live beyond the north wind in a distant region blessed by Apollo. Other versions keep the pursuit closer to Greece. The geography changes with the storyteller. The sense of distance remains. One evening, Hercules dreams. You see a silver bow beneath the moon. A woman stands among trees, but her face remains hidden. An arrow lies across her palm. She does not fire it. She simply asks a question. Will you understand the difference between taking and destroying? Hercules wakes before dawn. Was the dream sent by Artemis? No one can know, but he carries its warning with him. Eventually, near a river, the opportunity comes. The hind slows to drink. Hercules approaches carefully. Ancient versions disagree about exactly how he captures it. Some say he traps it with a net. Others say he wounds it lightly with an arrow placed so carefully that no serious harm is done. The uncertainty survives because oral traditions rarely remain perfectly still. What matters is that Hercules finally takes the animal alive. He binds it gently. Then the air changes. The forest becomes quiet. Artemis appears. Beside her stands Apollo in some versions of the story. The goddess is angry. You can imagine Hercules facing her beneath the trees, suddenly aware that physical strength means almost nothing before an Olympian deity. He does not raise his weapon. He explains. The capture is not his choice. Eurystheus commanded it. The oracle requires obedience. Hercules promises that the hind will not be harmed. Perhaps Artemis already understands. Perhaps the year-long pursuit itself has been another test. She allows him to continue, but the sacred animal must eventually return to her. The warning from the dream has been answered. Capture is not ownership. Hercules can carry the hind to Tiryns, but he cannot truly possess what belongs to a goddess. When Eurystheus sees the magnificent animal, another problem arises. The king wants it. Hercules must obey his command without breaking his promise to Artemis. So he uses cunning. He tells Eurystheus to take the hind himself. Hercules loosens his hold. The king reaches forward. The animal leaps. In an instant, it is free. Golden antlers flash in the sunlight. The hind races away. Hercules calmly tells Eurystheus that he was simply too slow. It is a small victory, almost playful compared with the darkness of the earlier labors, but it reveals another transformation. The hero who once relied upon force is learning diplomacy, restraint, and cleverness. Yet there is little time to enjoy it. Eurystheus has another command. Farther west in Arcadia rises Mount Erymanthus. Snow gathers on its upper slopes in winter. Forests cover the valleys below. And somewhere among those mountains lives a gigantic wild boar whose charges have destroyed fields and terrified settlements. This time Hercules must capture the beast alive. The command sounds familiar, but the road to Erymanthus will bring him into contact with creatures more dangerous than the boar itself, Centaur. And one of the poisoned arrows prepared beside the dead Hydra is about to fulfill the warning hidden in Lerna. You leave the sacred hind disappearing among distant trees. Ahead, clouds gather over the mountains. Thunder moves faintly across the Arcadian sky. And Hercules turns toward the snow-covered heights of Erymanthus. You turn west with Hercules, leaving the gentler valleys behind as the mountains of Arcadia rise around you. The air becomes colder. Clouds gather against the slopes of Mount Erymanthus, and by afternoon a thin veil of snow begins falling through the pine trees. It settles on branches, on grey stones, and across the lion skin resting over Hercules' shoulders. Somewhere above, the boar is moving. You occasionally find evidence of it. Earth torn open beneath oak trees, deep tracks crossing patches of snow, young trees broken near the roots. The Erymanthian boar is not protected by a goddess like the Golden Hind, but Eurystheus has again demanded that Hercules capture his quarry alive. Before the hunt begins, however, Hercules finds shelter. He reaches the cave of a centaur named Pholus. The centaurs occupy a strange place in Greek imagination, half human and half horse. They often represent the uncertain boundary between civilization and wilderness. Some are wise and disciplined. Others are impulsive, violent, and ruled by appetite. Pholus belongs to the gentler tradition. He welcomes Hercules. Inside the cave, firelight moves across rough stone. The warmth feels comforting after the snowy road. Roasted meat fills the air with a rich scent, and for a little while the dangerous labour ahead seems distant. Then Hercules notices a jar of wine. It is no ordinary jar, according to the story. The wine belongs collectively to the centaurs, a gift associated in some traditions with Dionysus. Pholus hesitates when Hercules asks him to open it. There is a warning here. The wine is not his alone to give. Opening it may bring consequences. Hercules insists. The seal is broken. The fragrance spreads through the cave, and outside the wind carries it into the mountains. Far away other centaurs smell the wine. They begin to come. At first you hear only distant hooves. Then the sound grows louder. Pholus understands immediately. The other centaurs are furious. They approach the cave armed with stones, branches, axes, and whatever weapons the old stories give them. The peaceful meal becomes a confrontation. Once again, a labour that seemed straightforward expands into something darker. Hercules fights. He drives the centaurs backward. Some flee through the forest, others continue attacking. Then Hercules reaches for the arrows he prepared at Lerna. The Hydra's poison, the warning attached to those arrows, returns. He fires. The poisoned points strike with terrifying effectiveness. The centaurs retreat. Hercules pursues them until some traditions bring him to the cave of Chiron. Perhaps the most famous centaur of all, Chiron is different from the others. He is wise, a teacher, a healer. Ancient heroes are said to have learned from him, and he is immortal. During the confusion, one of Hercules' poisoned arrows wounds him. Some versions make the injury accidental in slightly different ways, but the tragedy remains the same. Hydra venom enters Chiron's body. An immortal being receives a wound that cannot heal. He cannot simply die. He must endure. You remember Hercules kneeling beside the Hydra and dipping his arrows into its blood. At the time, the choice seemed practical. Now its hidden cost becomes visible. A monster defeated in one place can continue harming the world somewhere else. Greek myth rarely allows power to remain without consequence. Hercules cannot undo what has happened. Even his extraordinary strength is useless against poison already inside the body. Later traditions connect Chiron's release from suffering with the exchange of his immortality, sometimes involving Prometheus. But for now, Hercules carries the knowledge that another unintended wound follows his journey, and the sorrow is not finished. Back at the cave, Pholus examines one of the poisoned arrows. Perhaps he wonders how such a small object could kill a centaur. The arrow slips. Its point pierces him. Pholus dies. Hercules returns to find his host motionless. The cave that offered warmth now feels cold despite the fire. There is no monster here to blame, only consequence. For a hero seeking purification after an act of uncontrolled destruction, the pattern must be disturbing. How many lives can strength protect? How many can it accidentally destroy? Hercules buries Pholus. Then he turns again toward Erymanthus. The labour still waits. Snow is falling more heavily when he climbs higher into the mountains. This time he does not rush. He studies the tracks. He remembers what the Golden Hind taught him. Patience. Eventually, the boar appears between the trees. It is enormous. Its dark body moves through snow while curved tusks catch the pale winter light. Hercules shouts. The boar charges. He avoids the tusks and begins driving the creature uphill. This may seem strange until you understand his plan. Higher ground holds deeper snow. The boar is powerful, but its short legs must push through drifts. Hercules keeps it moving. The animal tires. Its breathing becomes heavy. Snow clings to its bristles. At last, it plunges into a deep drift and struggles to escape. Hercules approaches. He binds the creature with chains. No killing blow is needed. Once again, intelligence has done what brute strength alone could not. You descend from Erymanthus carrying the captured boar. When Hercules eventually reaches Tiryns, Eurystheus sees the enormous living animal, and according to one of the most memorable comic images in Greek mythology, the king panics. He hides inside a great bronze storage jar. You can almost hear generations of ancient listeners laughing. The fearful king who invents impossible tasks cannot bear to look at the results. But beneath the humour lies another truth. Hercules has changed. The man who strangled the Nemean Lion has now captured two powerful animals alive. His strength is becoming controlled. His patience is growing. Yet the deaths of Pholus and the suffering of Chiron remain behind him like shadows. That night, perhaps Hercules dreams again. He sees an arrow floating on black water. A drop of poison falls from its tip. The water darkens. Then a river appears, not poisoned, moving, powerful enough to carry filth away. When Hercules wakes, another command is waiting. He must go to Elis and clean the stables of King Augeas. Thousands of cattle have filled them with years of waste. Eurystheus expects humiliation, but Hercules remembers the river from the dream, and as snow melts behind you on the mountains of Arcadia, you begin travelling toward a kingdom where the next enemy will not have claws, fangs, or supernatural skin. It will simply be something no man believes can be cleaned in a single day. You descend from the cold mountains of Arcadia and travel west with Hercules toward the richer lands of Elis. Winter slowly loosens its grip. The snow disappears from the road, olive groves return, fields stretch between low hills, and warm sunlight settles across the countryside. Somewhere beyond the plains lies Olympia, where sacred traditions will gather around the sanctuary of Zeus, and where later generations will celebrate athletic contests remembered across the Greek world. But Hercules is not travelling toward glory. Eurystheus has chosen humiliation. The fifth labour, according to the familiar ordering, sounds almost insulting after lions, serpents, sacred deer, and mountain boars. Hercules must clean the stables of King Augeas. In a single day, you approach the kingdom beneath a clear sky. Augeas is wealthy beyond ordinary measure. He possesses enormous herds of cattle, sometimes said to have been given divine fertility because of the king's connection with the sun god Helios. Hundreds upon hundreds of animals move across the fields. Their bells ring softly. Dust rises beneath their hooves. The smell reaches you long before the stables themselves become visible. It grows stronger with every step. The structures have not been properly cleaned for years. Some traditions say 30 years. Ancient storytellers were not interested in modest numbers when exaggeration could make the challenge memorable. The accumulated waste has become almost geological. Layers upon layers. The air is thick with flies. Servants avoid the worst areas. Even Hercules pauses when he sees the scale of the task. You might expect him to begin carrying baskets. That is exactly what Eurystheus wants. The strongest man alive reduced to moving filth by hand. But Hercules has learned too much already. The Nemean Lion taught him that repeating a useless attack achieves nothing. The Hydra taught him to cooperate. The Golden Hind taught him patience. The Erymanthian Boar taught him to use the landscape. Now he looks beyond the stables. He studies the land. Nearby flow rivers. Ancient versions usually name the Alpheus and the Peneus, though details vary between storytellers. Their water moves steadily through the countryside. Hercules remembers the strange dream from the mountains. Black water, a falling drop of poison, then a river sweeping everything away. Perhaps it was only a dream. Perhaps it was a divine sign. In Greek stories, the boundary between the two is rarely comfortable. Before beginning, Hercules speaks with Augeas. The king does not believe the stables can be cleaned in one day. Hercules offers a bargain. If he succeeds, Augeas will give him a portion of the cattle, traditionally 1/10 of the herd. The king agrees. Why would he refuse? The task appears impossible. But Hercules does not enter the stables with a shovel. Instead, he begins breaking openings through the walls. Stone comes loose beneath his hands. Workers watch. Then Hercules walks toward the rivers. He digs channels. He alters the banks. He creates a path through which the water can be redirected. At first, only a small stream enters. Then the current strengthens. Water rushes toward the stables. It enters through one opening and pours through the accumulated waste. The effect is immediate. Years of filth begin moving. The stagnant becomes fluid. Dark water surges through the buildings and exits through another opening. The smell changes as fresh river water fills spaces that have remained foul for decades. You hear the roar of the current beneath the lowing of cattle. Hercules stands beside the channel and watches. For perhaps the first time in his labours, his greatest strength is not in his arms. It is in seeing a solution that others overlooked. Ancient Greeks admired physical excellence, but they also admired Metis' cunning intelligence, practical cleverness, the ability to solve a problem indirectly. Odysseus is famous for it. Here, Hercules reveals that he possesses something similar. By evening, the impossible task is complete. Sunlight turns golden across the fields. The redirected rivers have done in hours what hundreds of workers might have struggled to accomplish over months. The stables are clean. Now comes the more human conflict. Augeas learns that Hercules has been performing the task as part of his service to Eurystheus. The king refuses the promised payment. In some traditions, he even denies that he ever made the agreement. But there is a witness. Augeas' son, Phyleus, supports Hercules. The dispute becomes more than an argument over cattle. It becomes a question of honour. A promise has been made. Will a king keep it when keeping it becomes inconvenient? Ancient Greek society placed enormous importance on oaths, hospitality, and agreements witnessed before gods and men. Breaking such obligations could invite consequences extending far beyond ordinary politics. Augeas chooses denial. Phileus is driven away for supporting Hercules, and Hercules leaves without his reward. Later myths will bring him back to Elis under far more violent circumstances, and traditions even connect him with the foundation or reorganization of the Olympic Games after his eventual victory over Augeas. Historians continue to debate how these separate traditions developed and influenced one another. But for your journey, another judgment matters first. Hercules returns to Eurystheus. Again, the king refuses to count the labour. Why? Because Hercules expected payment. The Hydra was rejected because Iolaus helped. Now the stables are rejected because Hercules made a bargain. 2 completed tasks have effectively vanished from the official number. You can imagine the frustration. Hercules has obeyed. The impossible has been achieved. Yet the rules seem to change after the victory. Once, such humiliation might have triggered his rage. Now he absorbs it. That restraint may be one of the least celebrated victories of the entire story. No statue shows Hercules standing quietly while an unfair king speaks. But perhaps that moment reveals more transformation than any slain monster. Eurystheus gives the next command. Return to Arcadia. Near Lake Stymphalus, birds have gathered in enormous numbers. They are no ordinary flock. Some traditions give them bronze beaks and metallic feathers sharp enough to become weapons. Others emphasize their appetite for human flesh and their ability to overwhelm the countryside. Whatever their exact nature, they hide in marshland where Hercules cannot easily reach them. Another wetland, another enemy concealed among reeds. The memory of Lerna returns, but this time there will be no Hydra waiting beneath the water. There will be something above it. That night, as Hercules rests beneath a star-filled sky, a strange metallic sound passes through his dream, clattering, like bronze striking bronze. Then he sees an owl, the sacred bird of Athena. It watches him without moving. When morning comes, Hercules turns east toward Lake Stymphalus, and somewhere above the distant marsh, thousands of wings suddenly rise into the sky. You return with Hercules toward Arcadia, but the landscape waiting near Lake Stymphalus feels very different from the snowy heights of Erymanthus. The road descends into a broad mountain basin. Water lies beneath the pale sky, surrounded by reeds, marsh grass, and dark slopes. During certain seasons, the lake expands across the low ground. At other times it retreats, leaving mud and wetlands behind. It is a landscape of uncertain boundaries, neither completely land nor completely water. And somewhere within those reeds, thousands of birds are hiding. At first, you hear them rather than see them. A faint rustling moves across the marsh. Then comes another sound, metallic, almost like small pieces of bronze striking one another. Hercules stops. The strange noise resembles the warning from his dream. The owl, the clattering bronze, Athena. Perhaps the goddess has already given him a sign. You move closer to the shore. The mud is deep. Every step sinks. Reeds grow densely enough to hide almost anything. The Stymphalian birds have made this inaccessible place their refuge. Ancient traditions describe them in several ways. Some accounts say they possess bronze beaks. Others give them metallic feathers that can be launched like arrows. Certain later versions describe their claws as powerful enough to tear through armor. And some simply remember them as vicious man-eating birds that have multiplied until the surrounding countryside can no longer endure them. As with the Hydra, the details shift. The fear remains. You imagine what such a flock would mean to communities living nearby. Crops destroyed, travellers attacked, livestock taken, fields abandoned. One bird can be frightened away. Thousands become something else. A living storm. Hercules studies the marsh. He could shoot arrows into the reeds, but he cannot see his targets. He could enter the water, but the mud may trap him long before he reaches the birds. Once again, brute strength meets a problem it cannot easily touch. You remember the river at Augeas' stables, the golden hind, the Hydra. Each labor has quietly trained Hercules to ask a different question. Not simply, how hard can you strike? But what kind of problem is this? He needs the birds to leave their hiding place. And then the divine sign becomes clearer. Athena comes to his aid. In the traditional story, she gives Hercules a remarkable object created by Hephaestus, the divine smith, a pair of bronze clappers or rattles. They are sometimes called crotalae. You can imagine their surface catching the afternoon light. They do not look like a heroic weapon. No sharpened edge, no heavy blade, no spear point, only bronze designed to make noise. Yet Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, understands what Hercules needs. Not greater force, a way to change the battlefield. Hercules climbs onto higher ground overlooking the reeds. Wind moves across the lake. For a moment, everything becomes quiet. Then he strikes the bronze instruments together. The sound is enormous. Sharp metallic clattering rolls across the basin and echoes from the mountains. Again and again. The reeds explode with movement. Birds rise everywhere. Hundreds at first, then thousands. The sky darkens beneath beating wings. You hear shrieks, the rush of feathers, the terrible overlapping cries of an entire hidden population suddenly forced into the open. Hercules drops the clappers and reaches for his bow. The poisoned arrows of the Hydra remain with him. Another callback, another reminder. Each labor continues travelling into the next. He fires. One bird falls, then another. But the purpose is not necessarily to kill every creature. Many traditions describe Hercules driving the flock away. Those that survive fly toward distant lands, sometimes toward the Black Sea, where later Greek legends connect similar birds with the adventures of Jason and the Argonauts. The monster does not entirely vanish. It moves beyond the horizon into another story. That is one of the beautiful qualities of Greek mythology. Legends overlap. Heroes inherit dangers from one another. A creature escaping one tale may wait at the edge of another. Soon the sky begins clearing. The terrible flock retreats toward the distance. Individual shapes become dark specks. Then even those disappear. Silence returns to Lake Stymphalus. Not complete silence. Ordinary birds begin calling from the surviving reeds. Water moves gently against the shore. The wind still carries the smell of mud and vegetation. But the oppressive presence is gone. Hercules stands beneath the open sky. There is no dead monster at his feet this time. No hide to wear. No enormous body to carry back to Eurystheus. Only empty air where danger used to be. And perhaps that is enough. For ancient Greeks, birds could carry powerful associations. Their flight was watched for omens. Their movements could be interpreted as signs of divine intention. The sky itself was a place where gods communicated indirectly with mortals. So there is something fitting about Athena helping Hercules defeat a threat that belongs to the air. Wisdom has entered the labours more openly now. The hero is no longer merely surviving monsters. He is learning how to understand them. When Hercules returns to Tiryns, Eurystheus cannot easily deny this victory. The birds have gone. Another labour is finished. Yet the next command carries Hercules farther from the familiar mainland than any previous task. He must cross the sea. Crete waits to the south. Even to Greek audiences, the island carries memories older than many of their own cities. Ruined palaces and ancient traditions would later inspire stories of King Minos, the labyrinth, Theseus, Ariadne, and the Minotaur. Archaeology has revealed the extraordinary Bronze Age civilization modern scholars call Minoan. With vast palace complexes, vivid wall paintings, maritime trade, and striking images of bulls, the connection between those archaeological realities and later Greek myths remains debated. But bulls clearly possessed enormous symbolic importance in the ancient Aegean. And on Crete, according to Eurystheus, one particular bull has become uncontrollable. It may be the same magnificent animal once sent from the sea by Poseidon. King Minos was supposed to sacrifice it. He did not. A broken promise to a god followed, and from that failure came consequences that would haunt an entire royal house. Hercules receives the order. Capture the Cretan bull, alive. That evening, you reach a harbour. Wooden ships rise and fall against their mooring ropes. Sailors carry jars and bundles across the quay. The smell of salt, fish, pitch, and olive oil fills the air. Far beyond the harbour wall, the sea darkens beneath sunset. A sailor gives Hercules a warning. Storms have been seen to the south. Poseidon may be restless. Then, somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder murmurs over the water. Hercules steps aboard. The sail rises, and as the mainland slowly recedes behind you, the road of the labours leaves solid earth and carries you onto the wine-dark sea. You sail south with Hercules as the mountains of the Greek mainland slowly disappear behind the horizon. The ship rises and falls beneath you. Timbers creak. Ropes tighten whenever the wind fills the square sail, and seawater occasionally breaks across the bow in a veil of cold spray. Around you stretches the Aegean. By daylight it glitters beneath the sun. Toward evening it becomes darker, almost violet, and distant islands appear like sleeping shapes along the horizon. Ancient Greeks depended upon this sea. It connected communities more often than it separated them. Merchant vessels carried wine, olive oil, pottery, metals, grain, timber, and stories between islands and harbours. Sailors brought news of foreign rulers and distant sanctuaries. Myths travelled aboard ships as naturally as cargo. Yet the sea was never considered entirely safe. Poseidon ruled here. A calm morning could become a storm before nightfall. Sailors poured offerings before dangerous voyages because beneath every practical skill remained an awareness that divine forces might change human plans without warning. Hercules watches clouds gathering ahead. The warning heard at the harbour returns to you. Poseidon may be restless. The wind strengthens. Sailors lower part the sail. The deck tilts beneath your feet. Rain begins. For a while, Crete vanishes behind grey water and mist. Lightning flickers far away. Hercules grips the side of the vessel. His strength means little against the sea. You have seen him strangle the Nemean Lion and stand among the Hydra's heads. But no pair of hands can seize a storm. Perhaps that helplessness is another lesson. Every hero eventually enters a place where his greatest gift becomes irrelevant. Then, almost as suddenly as it began, the storm moves east. The rain softens. Clouds open. Stars appear. One sailor points south. A dark line lies against the horizon. Crete. You approach the island by morning. Mountains rise beyond the coast, their ridges softened by distance. Seabirds circle above the harbour. Fishing vessels move through the shallows while traders unload amphorae and baskets. The smell of salt mixes with smoke from cooking fires. Crete carries a weight of legend unlike almost anywhere else in the Greek world. Long before Hercules arrives in mythic chronology, Zeus himself is said to have been hidden here as an infant, protected from his father Cronus. Later comes Minos, then the bull from the sea. Poseidon sends the magnificent creature after Minos asks for a divine sign confirming his right to rule. The agreement is simple. The bull will appear, Minos must sacrifice it back to the god. But when the animal emerges from the sea, it is too beautiful, too valuable. Minos keeps it. He sacrifices another animal instead. The deception is a dangerous one. You have already seen what broken promises can do. Algiers refused the payment he promised Hercules. Now you encounter an older royal failure. Minos breaks an obligation to a god. According to the familiar myth, Poseidon responds by causing Pasiphae, the wife of Minos, to develop an unnatural desire for the bull. From that strange and disturbing union comes the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. The Minotaur will belong to the story of Theseus rather than Hercules, but its shadow hangs over Crete. The bull Hercules has been sent to capture may be the same animal that began that tragedy. Some traditions identify it directly. Others leave the connection less certain. Again, the mythology refuses to settle into a single clean genealogy. But the symbolic pattern is unmistakable. A king receives a divine gift. He refuses to surrender it. The gift becomes a curse. You travel inland. The landscape is dry and bright. Olive trees cover slopes. Goats move among rocks. Villages stand behind low walls. And everywhere you hear stories of the bull. It has escaped royal control. Fields have been trampled. Fences shattered. Farmers no longer trust the roads when the animal is nearby. Some accounts even say it breathes fire, though this detail belongs more strongly to later traditions. Whatever the exact form, the bull has become a living reminder of Minos's broken promise. Hercules approaches the king. The meeting is strangely calm. Minos does not attempt to stop him. Some versions say he even offers assistance. Hercules refuses. The labour is his. Perhaps he remembers Eurystheus rejecting the Hydra because Iolaus helped. He will give the fearful king no excuse this time. By evening, Hercules follows tracks toward open countryside. The prints are deep. Broken branches mark the animal's passage. Then you hear it, a heavy snort somewhere beyond a ridge. Hercules climbs. The setting sun spreads orange light across Crete. And there, on the far side of a field, stands the bull. It is enormous. Its pale hide seems almost luminous beneath the fading sky. Its horns curve outward. For several moments, it does not move. You can imagine why Minos once hesitated to sacrifice such an animal. Beauty and danger exist together before you. That combination would have felt familiar to Greek audiences. The gods often give mortals things too magnificent to possess safely. Hercules steps into the field. The bull turns. Its hoof scrapes the earth. Dust rises. Then, somewhere behind you, an old Cretan shepherd calls a warning. Do not let it reach the sea. The words carry more meaning than they first appear to. If this bull once came from Poseidon's waters, what happens if it returns? Would the god reclaim it? Would the animal disappear beneath the waves? No tradition gives you certainty. Hercules does not intend to discover the answer. He moves between the bull and the distant coast. The animal lowers its head. The evening wind passes through the grass. Far away, waves strike the Cretan shore. For one quiet moment, man and beast watch each other beneath the first emerging stars. Hercules has been told to bring the bull back alive. No poisoned arrows, no sword, no killing blow, only control. The bull charges, and you stand with Hercules on the ancient island of Crete as another sacred creature comes thundering toward him. You hear the bull before it reaches Hercules. Hooves strike the dry Cretan earth with a deep, repeating thunder. Dust rises behind the animal. Its pale body catches the last light of evening, and its horns remain lowered as it charges across the field. Hercules waits. He carries no drawn sword. The Hydra-poisoned arrows remain untouched. Eurystheus has demanded the bull alive, and after the dispute over Iolaus at Lerna, Hercules has another reason to complete this labour without assistance. The distance closes, and then he moves. Hercules steps aside and reaches for the horns. For a moment, man and animal seem locked together. The bull twists its enormous head. Its hooves tear through the soil. Hercules is pushed backward. You can hear his feet scraping across gravel as he struggles to remain upright. Yet he does not release his grip. This is different from the Nemean Lion. There, Hercules strangled an animal that could not be pierced. Here, he must dominate without destroying. That distinction matters. The bull is dangerous, but its story began not with its own wrongdoing. It began with a human promise. Minos asked Poseidon for a sign. The god sent the bull. Minos refused to sacrifice it. Once again, the creature carries the consequences of a king's decision. Hercules pulls against the horns. The bull turns. It attempts another violent rush, but the hero moves with it rather than resisting every motion directly. Slowly, he exhausts the animal. The moon rises. Cooler air begins moving down from the hills. At last, the bull's breathing becomes heavy. Its resistance weakens. Hercules binds it. The struggle is finished without a killing blow. You stand beneath the Cretan night while the animal that once seemed uncontrollable now waits beside the son of Zeus. Somewhere among the mountains, perhaps a temple fire burns for Poseidon. Perhaps the god watches. The old shepherd's warning returns to you. Do not let it reach the sea. But the sea is exactly where Hercules must go. He needs to transport the animal back to the Greek mainland. Ancient storytellers do not always pause to explain the practical details of heroic transportation. Myth moves according to its own rhythm, in some versions. Hercules simply rides the bull across the sea. The image is magnificent. You can imagine him seated upon the creature's broad back as it enters the dark water. Moonlight spreads across the waves. The bull swims north. Hercules holds firmly to its horns. Whether ancient listeners understood this literally or simply accepted it as part of heroic storytelling is impossible to recover. Other traditions allow you to imagine a ship. Either way, the crossing becomes an echo of an older myth. Zeus himself once took the form of a bull and carried Europa across the sea to Crete. Now Zeus's son carries, or is carried by, another extraordinary bull away from the same island. Greek mythology delights in such mirrored images. Stories answer one another across generations. By the time you approach the mainland, dawn is breaking. The sea turns from black to grey, then pale gold. Fishermen near the shore stare as Hercules arrives with the enormous animal. News travels ahead of him toward Tiryns. Eurystheus knows another impossible labour has been completed. When Hercules presents the bull, the king must decide what to do with it. According to some traditions, Eurystheus intends to dedicate it to Hera. The goddess refuses the offering because accepting an animal captured by Hercules would bring honour to the hero she hates. So the bull is released, and this creates another strange consequence. The monster of one labour becomes the danger of another hero's story. The animal wanders north. Eventually, tradition places it near Marathon in Attica. There it becomes known as the Marathonian bull. Later, Theseus will capture it. The stories connect again. Hercules does not simply pass through a mythological world. His actions reshape the world that later heroes inherit. You can almost picture ancient storytellers linking these traditions during long evenings, one tale naturally opening into another. Archaeological discoveries on Crete have made the bull imagery surrounding these myths even more fascinating. At Bronze Age sites such as Knossos, images of bulls appear repeatedly. Famous fresco fragments depict human figures apparently leaping over bulls. Bull horns appear in architecture and ritual imagery. Modern researchers continue to debate precisely what these scenes represented. Sport, ritual, religious symbolism, perhaps several meanings at once. No surviving inscription explains the later Greek myths for you. There is no simple archaeological bridge from Minoan bull imagery to the stories of Minos, the Minotaur, and Hercules. Still, when you stand imaginatively within that ancient landscape, it is easy to understand why later Greeks might have remembered Crete as an island of sacred bulls and dangerous royal mysteries. Hercules leaves the animal behind. Another labour is complete, yet Eurystheus does not allow him long to rest. The next command points far away from Crete, north, beyond familiar Greek landscapes, toward Thrace. To many Greeks, Thrace represented a rugged frontier beyond the northeastern edge of their own cultural heartlands. It was associated with powerful warriors, horses, cold winds, and traditions that could appear strange or frightening to southern audiences. There rules King Diomedes, not the Greek warrior of the Trojan War who shares his name. This Diomedes is a Thracian king, sometimes described as a son of Ares, and he owns 4 mares: Podargos, Lampon, Santos, Deinos. Their names survive in some traditions like a whispered inventory of danger. The animals are magnificent, strong, restless, and fed on human flesh. Travellers who enter the king's territory may become their food. The labour sounds simple when Eurystheus speaks it. Bring back the mares of Diomedes, but a troubling question follows the command. Are the horses themselves truly monsters? Or have they been made monstrous by the man who controls them? That question will matter. Before Hercules departs, he dreams beneath the lion skin. He sees 4 horses running across a dark plain. Their mouths are stained red. Behind them stands a king holding chains. Then the chains vanish. The horses continue running. When Hercules wakes, he remembers the image. Perhaps the dream is only his mind arranging the stories he's heard. Perhaps something divine has warned him. The distinction remains uncertain. He prepares for the northern journey. This time the road may involve companions, depending upon which ancient version you follow. One tradition places the young Abderus beside Hercules, a companion whose fate will become inseparable from the mares. The morning is cool when you leave Tiryns. Clouds move eastward. The familiar mountains slowly recede behind you. Ahead lie long roads, unfamiliar peoples, and the distant country of Thrace. And somewhere beyond those northern hills, 4 horses pull against iron chains. Their keeper approaches with raw meat. The animals begin to scream. You travel north with Hercules until the familiar landscapes of southern Greece begin to feel far behind. The road stretches through valleys, across rivers, and along rough coastal paths where colder winds move down from distant mountains. Villages become less familiar. Languages and customs shift. Traders speak of Thrace as a country of exceptional horsemen and fierce warriors. To ancient Greek audiences, Thrace could seem both close and strangely remote. Greek settlements existed along its coasts, and trade connected the region deeply with the Aegean world. Yet Greek storytellers also fill the Thracian interior with kings, gods, musicians, warriors, and mysteries. Ares, god of violent warfare, was sometimes strongly associated with this northern landscape, and King Diomedes is said to be his son. As you approach the king's territory, stories about his horses become darker. Travellers disappear. Prisoners are taken toward the royal stables. At night, people hear the animals screaming behind walls. The 4 mares have been trained to eat human flesh. Perhaps the most unsettling part of the story is not that horses behave like monsters. It is that someone taught them to. Hercules remembers the dream from Tyrans. 4 horses, a king, chains, then the chains disappearing while the animals continue to run. Was it a warning about what captivity creates? No one can know. This time Hercules is not necessarily alone. Ancient traditions differ. Some give him a group of companions. One especially important figure is Abderus, a young man remembered as close to Hercules and, in later tradition, associated with the founding of Abdera. You approach the stables after sunset. Torchlight burns near the entrance. The smell reaches you before you see the horses. Sweat, hay, leather, and beneath them, something metallic. Blood. The mares pull against heavy chains. Their eyes are wide. Their muscles tremble beneath dark coats. When Hercules enters, the animals turn toward him. They do not behave like ordinary horses expecting grain. Their teeth show. One snaps at the air. The chains tighten. Hercules studies them. Once again, he's been told to capture rather than kill. He breaks the restraint, securing them to their stalls, and begins leading the animals away. But the escape does not remain unnoticed. Diomedes gathers his men. Torches appear behind you. Shouts carry through the darkness. Hercules needs someone to guard the mares while he turns back to confront the king. He entrusts them to Abderus. It seems reasonable. It becomes a tragedy. You follow Hercules toward the approaching soldiers. Bronze catches the firelight. Diomedes comes with them. The king is confident. Why would he not be? He rules here. The roads belong to him. The stables belong to him. The horses belong to him. And perhaps the people fed to those horses have also been treated as possessions. The battle begins. Hercules drives the Thracians backward. Traditions vary about the details, but Diomedes is defeated. Then Hercules returns toward the mares. Something is wrong. The horses are agitated. The ground has been torn by hooves. Abderus is no longer standing where Hercules left him. The warning attached to the Hydra's poison is not the only pattern repeating through these labours. Again, Hercules has left someone he cares about near a danger he believed he could control. Again, the cost is irreversible. The mares have killed Abderus. Some versions say they devour him. For a moment, you can imagine Hercules standing completely still. The strongest man alive has returned too late. There are wounds strength cannot prevent. There are victories that arrive beside grief. Ancient stories often move quickly past such moments, but if you remain here a little longer, the emotional weight becomes difficult to ignore. Hercules began the labours because his own madness destroyed his family. Now another companion has died during his quest for purification. How many losses can one road contain? His grief turns toward Diomedes, in the best-known version. Hercules feeds the cruel king to his own horses. The act has the harsh symmetry Greek mythology often favours. The man who trained animals to consume human beings becomes their final victim. After eating their master, the mares become calm. The detail is strange, perhaps even symbolic. The true source of their savagery has been removed. The horses remain dangerous animals, but the unnatural cycle created by Diomedes ends with him. Another interpretation suggests something darker. Violence consumes the person who cultivates it. For ancient audiences, the image required little explanation. A ruler who turns others into instruments of cruelty may eventually discover that cruelty does not remain obedient forever. Hercules gathers the mares, but before leaving Thrace he honours Abderus. Tradition says he founds a city near the young man's grave and names it Abdera. Modern historians do not treat such foundation myths as straightforward records of actual urban origins. Greek cities frequently developed heroic stories explaining their names, sacred places, or identities. Yet these traditions reveal something important about memory. A person can die. A name can remain attached to a landscape for centuries. Hercules leaves behind a memorial rather than allowing Abderus to vanish completely. It's a small act against oblivion. Then you begin the long journey south. The mares now travel under control. When Hercules eventually presents them to Eurystheus, the traditions again diverge. Some say the king dedicates them to Hera. Others say he releases them, and wild animals eventually destroy them near Mount Olympus. Another tradition claims descendants of the mares survive into later heroic generations. There is no single ending, only echoes. Hercules has completed another labour, but the road ahead is changing. Eurystheus now sends him even farther from the familiar centre of Greece, across the sea, toward the distant country of the Amazons. Their queen is Hippolyta. She possesses a magnificent war belt or girdle given to her by Ares as a symbol of royal authority. Eurystheus wants it for his daughter Admete. At first, this labour seems unlikely to require killing any monster at all. Hercules must simply obtain the belt, and according to one powerful version of the story, Hippolyta is willing to give it to him. That should make the journey easy. But Hera is still watching. The goddess who sent serpents to Hercules' cradle and a crab into the marsh at Lerna has not abandoned her hatred. That night, as Hercules prepares to sail east, a bird circles above the harbour. It cries 3 times. An old sailor watches it disappear toward the dark horizon. He calls it a bad omen. Beware, he warns, when friendship begins too easily. Hercules looks toward the waiting sea. Ships rock gently against the quay. Beyond them, moonlight forms a silver road across the water. Somewhere at the end of that road waits a warrior queen who has not yet decided to become his enemy. And somewhere above the clouds, Hera begins to decide for her. You leave the harbour beneath a pale morning sky and sail with Hercules toward lands that many Greek storytellers place near the distant shores of the Black Sea. The voyage is long enough for familiar coastlines to fade into memory. At night, the ship moves beneath constellations sailors have trusted for generations. The wooden hull creaks softly. Waves brush along its sides. Tar, salt, damp rope, and smoke from a small sheltered flame mingle in the cool air. Hercules has faced creatures whose danger was obvious. The lion roared. The hydra hissed. The mares of Diomedes pulled against blood-stained chains. This labour is different. There may be no monster waiting at all. Eurystheus has ordered Hercules to obtain the war belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. The object is no ordinary ornament. Tradition says Ares gave it to Hippolyta as a symbol of her authority. To take it, therefore, is to take something carrying political and sacred meaning. Ancient Greek stories imagined the Amazons as a society of formidable warrior women, living beyond the familiar boundaries of the Greek world. Their homeland shifts from one tradition to another, sometimes near the Black Sea, sometimes farther east. Archaeological discoveries from the Eurasian steppe have revealed burials of women accompanied by weapons, and such findings have encouraged modern researchers to reconsider the historical experiences that may have helped shape Greek stories about warrior women. Yet myth and archaeology cannot simply be folded into one another. The Amazons of Hercules belong to legend, and legend has brought you to their shore. When the ship approaches land, riders appear. They watch from a distance. Sunlight catches spear points. Hercules disembarks without immediately reaching for a weapon. The sailor's warning returns. Beware when friendship begins too easily. But what if the warning itself is dangerous? What if expecting betrayal creates betrayal? Hippolyta comes to meet Hercules. Ancient versions differ about the encounter, but one of the most compelling traditions says the queen receives him peacefully. You can imagine her standing beneath the open sky, wearing the belt of Ares. She asks why Hercules has come. He tells her. No deception, no raid, no challenge. Eurystheus has commanded him to bring the belt back to Greece, and Hippolyta agrees to give it to him. For a moment, the labour appears finished. No battle, no monster, no blood. Perhaps Hercules himself is surprised, after everything he has endured. Could one task truly end through conversation? The answer is almost yes. Then Hera intervenes. The goddess takes on another appearance and moves among the Amazons. A rumour begins. The foreigner has not come merely for the belt. Hercules intends to abduct their queen. You know the accusation is false. The Amazons do not. Warriors gather. Horses are saddled. Shields rise. A peaceful shore begins transforming into a battlefield because of information deliberately corrupted by a god. This is one of the most painfully human moments in the cycle. No invulnerable hide is required. No supernatural poison. Only suspicion. Hercules sees armed Amazons approaching. He remembers the sailor's omen. Friendship began easily. Now warriors are coming. Perhaps the warning seems fulfilled. And that is precisely the tragedy. He interprets their approach as proof that Hippolyta has deceived him. The Amazons interpret his presence as proof that their queen is threatened. Each side believes the other has broken trust. Hera needs only to watch. What happens next varies sharply across ancient traditions. In some accounts, Hippolyta dies in the fighting. In others, Hercules kills her himself and takes the belt. Different versions connect other Amazon queens, including Antiope or Melanippe, to the episode. The tradition refuses to give you one clean sequence, but the labour ends in violence, and that is enough to make the earlier piece feel tragic. Imagine Hercules holding the belt after the fighting ends. It is the object he came to obtain. He has succeeded, yet the victory feels empty. Hippolyta was not the Nemean Lion. She was not the Hydra. She could speak. She could negotiate. She was willing to help. The true monster in this labour may never have possessed claws or fangs. Perhaps it was mistrust. Perhaps divine resentment. Perhaps the speed with which fear transforms uncertainty into violence. Ancient Greek audiences knew that gods could distort mortal lives, but they also knew humans remained responsible for the choices made beneath divine pressure. That tension appears repeatedly in tragedy. How much freedom do you possess when gods influence events? Where does destiny end and responsibility begin? There is no easy answer. Hercules carries the belt back toward his ship. The shore grows quiet behind him. You remember earlier promises. Molochus waiting 30 days. Artemis allowing the sacred hind to leave only because Hercules promised not to harm it. Augus breaking his agreement. Again and again, these labours have revolved around trust. Sometimes a promise saves, sometimes its violation destroys, and sometimes, as here, trust dies before anyone has truly broken it. The ship sails away. Sea wind cools Hercules' face. Perhaps he looks back only once. The Amazon shore becomes a thin line, then disappears. When he eventually reaches Tiryns, Eurystheus receives the belt. The object passes into the possession for which the labour was supposedly undertaken. But Hercules carries something less visible away from the palace. Another memory, another death, another reminder that completing a command is not the same as emerging untouched. Soon Eurystheus summons him again. This time the destination lies not east but west, far west, beyond the regions familiar to most Greek travellers. Hercules must bring back the cattle of Geryon. The journey will carry him toward the edge of the known world. There, according to the stories, lives a strange being with 3 bodies joined together. Geryon. His red cattle are guarded by a herdsman named Eurytion, and beside them waits Orthrus, a monstrous 2-headed hound. Some traditions make Orthrus the brother of Cerberus. The name means little to Hercules now, but it is an omen of what waits at the end of all his labours. One monstrous dog will stand near the western edge of the earth, another will wait beneath it. That night Hercules dreams of 2 dogs. One has 2 heads, the other has 3. Between them stretches a road disappearing into darkness. Above the road burns a red sunset. Hercules wakes before dawn. The belt of Hippolyta has been delivered. The eastern journey is finished. Now you turn with him toward the west, where the sun sinks each evening beyond the sea and where ancient Greeks imagined the boundaries between geography, mythology, and the unknown beginning to dissolve. You turn west with Hercules and begin one of the longest journeys of all the labours. The familiar world gradually falls behind. You cross dry plains where heat shimmers above the road. You follow coastlines where unfamiliar mountains rise beyond blue water. Villages become fewer, and the stories told around evening fires begin to describe places most Greeks will never see. Eurystheus has demanded the cattle of Geryon. The command sounds almost ordinary. Bring back a herd, yet nothing about the destination is ordinary. Geryon lives on Erythea, the mysterious red island at the western edge of the world. Ancient writers later attempted to place it near southern Iberia, around the region associated with Gades, modern Cadiz, but mythic geography does not behave like a modern map. To early storytellers, the far west is where the known world begins to blur. It is where the sun descends, where ocean surrounds the earth, where strange peoples and impossible beings can exist just beyond reliable knowledge. And Hercules is walking toward that boundary. The farther west you travel, the hotter the journey becomes. One afternoon, the sun seems almost unbearable. Heat presses against the lion's skin. Stone burns beneath your feet. There is little shade. Hercules looks upward. Helios, the sun god, crosses the heavens in blazing brilliance. Then Hercules does something astonishing. He raises his bow toward the sun. Perhaps it is anger. Perhaps exhaustion. Perhaps the same impulsive defiance that has always lived inside him. He threatens Helios with an arrow. For a mortal to threaten the sun itself should be madness. Yet Helios does not destroy him. Instead, the god admires his boldness. According to the famous tradition, Helios gives Hercules a golden cup or vessel in which he can cross ocean. You have encountered divine assistance before. Athena gave the bronze clappers at Stymphalus. Artemis permitted the sacred hind to be taken. Now Helios provides passage toward a place ordinary travellers cannot reach. The golden vessel rests upon the water. You step into it with Hercules. The western sea spreads around you. At sunset, everything becomes red and gold. The horizon seems endless. Ancient Greeks imagined ocean as a great river encircling the inhabited world. And the voyage toward Erythea carries Hercules beyond ordinary geography into something almost cosmic. Night comes, stars fill the sky, the golden cup moves across dark water, and Hercules remembers his dream. 2 dogs, one with 2 heads, one with 3, a road between them. The first dog is waiting ahead. Eventually, land appears. Erythea, the red island, low light spreads across its shore. Farther inland, cattle graze. Their hides are described as red, perhaps echoing the colour of sunset itself. They belong to Geryon, but before Hercules can reach them, he must pass their guardians. The first is Eurytion, the herdsman. The second is Orthrus. You hear the dog before you see it. A bark breaks across the quiet landscape. Then another answers, except both sounds come from the same animal. Orthrus emerges. 2 heads rise from one monstrous body. 4 eyes fix upon Hercules. The creature is usually said to be born from Typhon and Echidna, the terrible pair associated with some of Greek mythology's greatest monsters. That makes Orthrus kin to other horrors, and, according to the familiar genealogy, brother to Cerberus. The dream becomes clearer. The 2-headed dog stands before Hercules now. The 3-headed dog waits somewhere much farther along the road. Is this merely coincidence within a web of ancient stories? Or did storytellers deliberately create echoes between the Western labour and the final descent to Hades? Scholars continue to examine how these traditions developed. But within the myth, the symmetry feels almost prophetic. Orthrus charges. Hercules raises his club. Unlike the Nemean Lion, the dog possesses no invulnerable skin. The blow lands. The creature falls. Eurystheus rushes forward. He too is defeated. The guardians are gone, but Geryon has not yet appeared. Hercules approaches the cattle. Their bells sound softly. The scene is strangely peaceful after the violence. Animals lower their heads to graze beneath the western sky. Then someone carries news to their master. In some traditions, it is Meneuites, a herdsman of Hades who happens to be nearby. Again, the world of death appears at the edge of Hercules' journey. A servant connected with Hades witnesses what has happened. He tells Geryon, and the three-bodied ruler comes. Ancient artists struggled beautifully with the problem of depicting him. On surviving Greek pottery, Geryon can appear as three-armed warriors joined at the waist, often carrying shields, helmets, and spears. The image is not merely monstrous, it is formidable. Three warriors occupying one being, three sets of weapons, three bodies moving toward a single purpose. Perhaps the monster embodies overwhelming multiplicity, just as the Hydra did in another form. But unlike the Hydra, Geryon speaks through the traditions as a ruler and cattle owner. From his perspective, Hercules is the invader. That creates another uncomfortable question. Who is the monster when you arrive in someone else's land to take what belongs to him? Greek heroic myth does not always answer such questions. It often allows victory to determine the shape of memory. Geryon advances, his armor catches the dying sunlight. Hercules reaches for his bow. The arrows are still poisoned with Hydra venom. The choice made at Lerna continues travelling across the world. But before the confrontation begins, another sign appears. The sun touches the horizon. Everything becomes crimson. Cattle, earth, sea, even Geryon's armor seems stained red by the evening light. For ancient listeners, sunset was a daily mystery. The sun disappeared into the west and somehow returned in the east. Hercules has reached the place where that disappearance seems almost close enough to touch. He stands at the boundary between daylight and darkness, between the familiar world and the unknown, between one monstrous dog and another waiting beneath the earth. Geryon raises his weapons. The wind moves across Eurystheus. Hercules draws an arrow, and as the final edge of the sun slips beneath ocean, the three-bodied guardian of the red cattle begins to advance. You stand with Hercules beneath the fading red light of Eurystheus as Geryon advances across the open ground. Behind you, the cattle shift uneasily. Their bells make soft, irregular sounds. Ahead, the three-bodied ruler appears almost unreal against the western horizon. Three armoured forms move together, carrying shields and weapons beneath the last glow of sunset. Hercules has fought creatures with many heads before. At Lerna, multiplication itself seemed to be the Hydra's defense. But Geryon is different. He does not crawl from a poison swamp. He comes dressed like a warrior, and that makes this confrontation strangely solemn. From the Greek heroic perspective, Geryon is an obstacle. From his own perspective, he is defending his herd. This uncertainty has followed Hercules increasingly often. Not every opponent is simply evil. Not every victory is morally clean. The bow bends. Hercules releases. The arrow crosses the evening air. Ancient tradition tells you that the Hydra-poisoned shaft strikes Geryon and brings the confrontation to its end. Some poets describe the arrow piercing one of his heads. Others preserve different details. But once again, the poison gathered long ago at Lerna determines the outcome. You remember the Hydra's blood darkening those arrowheads. Since then, the poisoners wounded centaurs and helped Hercules overcome enemies across enormous distances. Every choice leaves a trail. Geryon falls. The western island becomes quiet. Orthrus lies dead. Eurystheus is gone. The three-bodied master of Eurystheus will not rise again. Only the cattle remain. Hercules gathers them and begins the journey east. Yet before leaving the far west, another famous tradition attaches itself to his name. You travel toward the narrow waters separating Europe from Africa. Mountains rise on either side. Later generations will know the northern height as the Rock of Gibraltar and the southern counterpart through several competing identifications. To the ancient Mediterranean imagination, these become the Pillars of Hercules, One tradition says Hercules raises them, another says he separates a mountain that had once joined the continents. Still another treats the pillars less literally, as markers of the limit reached by the hero. Different stories survive because the symbol became more important than any single explanation. Here lies the boundary. Beyond it stretches the Atlantic, unknown water, a world outside the comfortable geography of Greek sailors. The Pillars of Hercules would endure for centuries as a cultural image of the edge of the known. Later maps and traditions associated the region with warnings about going farther. Yet Hercules has already crossed that boundary. He has travelled where ordinary men were not expected to travel and returned carrying proof. Perhaps this is one reason his mythology spread so easily through the Mediterranean, wherever Greek settlers and travellers reached distant lands. Hercules could be imagined as having arrived before them. Mountains, springs, roads, temples, and cities accumulated stories about his passage. A hero became a way of turning unfamiliar geography into remembered geography. But Hercules has a practical problem. The cattle must reach Eurystheus alive. The return journey is far more difficult than simply sailing home in Helios's golden cup. Herd moves slowly. Animals wander. Rivers must be crossed. Mountains must be passed. And Hera has not forgotten him. You begin travelling east. Days become weeks. Dust rises round the cattle. At night, Hercules sleeps near them beneath the lion's skin, listening to bells and distant wolves. One evening he dreams again. The two dogs return. Orthrus stands behind him now. The two-headed guardian is silent. Ahead waits the three-headed dog. Between them the road has become longer. A woman's voice speaks from somewhere beyond the darkness. What you carry home will be scattered before it arrives. Hercules wakes. The cattle are restless. The warning begins to fulfill itself soon afterward. In one tradition, Hera sends a gadfly. The insect attacks the herd. The cattle panic. Suddenly the orderly group becomes chaos. Animals run in different directions. Some disappear into hills. Others race along unfamiliar roads. Hercules shouts and follows. Hours become days as he attempts to recover them. The labour that seemed completed at Eurystheus is breaking apart on the return journey. Again, Hera does not need to create a new monster. A tiny insect is enough? The contrast would have pleased ancient storytellers. The hero who defeated Geryon can still be frustrated by something he can barely see. Strength has scale. Fate does not. Hercules gathers what cattle he can. Different regional traditions describe his return through Iberia, Gaul, Italy, Sicily, and other landscapes, attaching local episodes to the larger myth. Historians often interpret these sprawling routes as evidence of how Hercules became woven into the identities of communities across the ancient Mediterranean. As Greek and later Roman audiences retold the story, the hero's footsteps expanded. You can almost watch mythology spreading across a map, but within the story, Hercules simply keeps walking. Near Italy, another danger appears in some traditions. A figure named Cacus steals part of the herd and hides the cattle by dragging them backward so their tracks point in the wrong direction. It is an ingenious deception. Hercules initially passes the hiding place. Then one of the stolen animals calls out. Another answers from the herd. The trick is revealed. Again, sound uncovers what sight cannot. The cattle are recovered, and Hercules continues. Yet the road remains long, at a river crossing. The water runs cold around his legs. In mountain passes, wind presses against the lion skin. At settlements, people gather to stare at the stranger driving red cattle from the edge of the world. Perhaps they ask where he found them. Perhaps the answer sounds impossible. Beyond the pillars, beyond the sunset, on the island of a three-bodied king, myth often begins exactly this way. Someone returns from far away. The story becomes larger each time it is told. Eventually the mountains of Greece begin to feel close again. But Hera has one final obstruction. According to some traditions, she causes a river to flood so Hercules cannot cross. He responds by filling part of the channel with stones until the cattle can pass. Even water must be negotiated. Finally, exhausted and diminished in number, the herd approaches Tiryns. Eurystheus receives the cattle. Tradition says they are sacrificed to Hera. The irony is complete. The goddess who obstructed the entire journey receives its final offering. Hercules might expect the end of his service to be approaching, but 2 labours have been rejected. The Hydra, the Augean stables. The number has not yet reached what Eurystheus demands, and now the king chooses tasks no ordinary geography can easily contain. The next prize belongs to Hera herself. Golden apples. They grow in a hidden garden somewhere at the boundary of the world. No road sign points toward it. No sailor can agree on its location. A dragon named Ladon guards the tree, and somewhere near the garden stands Atlas, the titan who bears the heavens. That night Hercules looks west again. He has already reached the sunset once. Now he must find something even more elusive, a place hidden not merely by distance but by divine secrecy. And before sleep takes him, he remembers the voice from his dream. The road between the 2 monstrous dogs is not finished. It is leading him toward a garden no mortal was meant to find. You watch the last of Gerion's cattle disappear behind the walls of Tiryns, and for a brief moment the road seems strangely empty. For months, perhaps longer. Their bells have followed Hercules across mountains, rivers, foreign coastlines, and dusty plains. Now there is silence. Eurystheus has received what he demanded, yet Hercules is not free. The king still refuses to recognize 2 earlier labours. Aeolus helped defeat the Hydra. Hercules expected payment for cleaning the stables of Augeas. So the service continues, and before Hercules can search for the golden apples, he must first discover where they are. That may be the greater challenge. You have already travelled toward the edge of the world once. Erythea could at least be approached through rumour. The Garden of the Hesperides is different. Ancient traditions place it in several distant regions. Some imagine it in the far west. Others associate it with the lands of Atlas in North Africa. Still others allow its geography to drift toward the mysterious northern or oceanic boundaries of the world. Perhaps that uncertainty is deliberate. A divine garden should not appear on an ordinary traveller's map. Hercules begins asking questions. At harbours, sailors shake their heads. At mountain shrines, priests repeat old fragments of stories. Merchants have heard of golden fruit somewhere beyond familiar roads, but none has seen it. You move through marketplaces smelling of bread, fish, wine, and olive oil while rumours contradict one another. One sailor says the garden lies where the sun descends into ocean. Another insists it can only be reached by travelling north. An old priest claims no mortal can find it unless the gods permit him. That statement feels less like information than a warning. The apples belong to Hera. According to tradition, Gaia, the earth, gave them as a wedding gift when Hera married Zeus. Hera planted them in a sacred garden. The Hesperides, mysterious nymphs associated with evening and the west, tend the trees. But Hera did not trust the nymphs alone. She placed a dragon there, Ladon. The creature coils around the sacred tree and never sleeps. Some traditions give it 100 heads. Others portray it more simply as an enormous serpent. Once again, numbers shift while the central image remains. A tree, golden fruit, a sleepless dragon, and a mortal forbidden to possess what grows there. Hercules travels onward, at last. He learns that the sea god Nereus may know the location. Nereus is old, even by divine standards, sometimes called the Old Man of the Sea. He knows hidden truths, but he does not surrender them easily. Hercules finds him near the water. The sea is calm that evening. Small waves move over stones. The sky has begun turning gold. Hercules seizes Nereus. Immediately, the god changes shape. In surviving traditions of shape-changing sea deities, transformation becomes a way of escaping capture. You imagine Hercules holding what was a man and suddenly feeling something else twisting in his arms. A serpent, then perhaps fire, then water, then an animal. The exact transformations vary in the storytelling tradition. The test is not really about identifying each form. It is about refusing to let go. Hercules has learned patience. He holds on. Eventually Nereus yields. The path becomes clearer. But the journey contains another confrontation. Hercules encounters Antaeus. The giant is associated with Libya and is often described as a son of Gaia and Poseidon. He challenges travellers to wrestle, And he possesses a secret. Whenever his body touches the earth, his mother Gaia renews his strength. Hercules does not initially understand. He wrestles the giant and throws him down. Antaeus rises stronger. Again Hercules forces him to the ground. Again the giant recovers. The pattern should feel familiar. The Hydra multiplied when attacked incorrectly. Antaeus grows stronger when defeated incorrectly. Once more Hercules faces a problem that punishes repetition. Then he notices the connection. Earth. The giant touches the ground and strength returns. So Hercules changes the rules. He lifts Antaeus. The giant's feet leave the soil. For the first time, Gaia cannot restore him. Hercules holds him above the earth and crushes him. The victory is another lesson in observation, but there is something melancholy about it too. Antaeus is strongest when connected to his mother. Separated from the earth that gave him life, he becomes mortal. Ancient myth often hides tenderness inside brutality. Even monsters belong somewhere. Even giants draw strength from a bond. You continue. Another ruler, Busiris of Egypt, enters certain versions of Hercules' wandering search. He has been told by a prophecy that sacrificing foreigners will end a famine, so strangers arriving in his kingdom are seized and offered to the gods. Hercules becomes the intended victim. The prophecy appears to justify cruelty, but Greek mythology repeatedly warns that interpreting divine messages can be dangerous. Hercules breaks his bonds and kills Busiris. A prophecy meant to preserve the king instead brings Hercules directly into his palace. Was the oracle misunderstood? Was Busiris doomed by the very ritual he believed would save him? The old stories leave the question open. The road continues. Days of heat give way to cold nights. Hercules sleeps beneath the Nemean skin. The lion remains with him, a constant reminder of how far he has travelled since the first cave. Then one night the old dream returns. 2 dogs, Orthrus behind, Cerberus ahead. But now something new appears between them. A tree. Golden apples shine among its branches like small suns. Around the trunk coils a serpent. Above everything stands a giant figure holding the stars. When Hercules wakes, he understands that the separate images of his journey are beginning to converge. The dragon. The apples, Atlas. He follows the directions extracted from Nereus. The landscape becomes increasingly strange and remote. Mountains rise against the horizon. The evening sky seems enormous. Then, after a journey measured more easily in legend than in miles, Hercules sees something ahead. At first it resembles a mountain. Then it moves. A figure stands at the edge of the world. His shoulders support a vast weight. Above him spreads the turning heaven. Atlas, the Titan condemned to bear the sky. And somewhere nearby, hidden beyond mortal sight, lies the garden Hercules has crossed the world to find. The sun begins to set. A golden glow spreads behind the mountains. For just a moment, Hercules thinks he can smell something impossible on the evening wind. Apples, sweet, fresh, growing in a place where no mortal hand is supposed to reach. You stand with Hercules beneath an evening sky so vast that the familiar world seems very far away. Ahead rises Atlas. At first, your mind struggles to understand what you're seeing. The Titan appears less like a man than part of the landscape itself. His feet are fixed against the earth. His shoulders bend beneath the immense weight above him, and the heavens seem to turn across his back. Stars are beginning to appear, one by one, then hundreds. Ancient Greeks imagined Atlas as belonging to an older divine generation. A Titan punished after the war between the Olympians and the Titans. Yet even the ancient sources do not always describe his burden in precisely the same way. Later art often shows Atlas carrying the globe of the earth. But the older myth is different. He supports the heavens. He holds sky and earth apart. That distinction makes the image even more extraordinary. Hercules approaches. Atlas looks down. Perhaps centuries have passed since anyone spoke to him as an equal. Perhaps time itself has become difficult to measure when every night brings the same stars turning above your shoulders. Hercules explains what he seeks. The golden apples of the Hesperides. Atlas knows them. That alone is progress. But the garden remains hidden. You follow Hercules farther into the strange western landscape. The air is cooler here. Mountain mist gathers in low places. The smell of unfamiliar flowers moves on the breeze. Somewhere ahead, water runs over stone with a soft, continuous sound. Then you see light between the trees. Not torchlight. Something warmer, golden. The garden appears gradually. Ancient storytellers allow you to imagine it almost outside ordinary time. Trees grow beneath a sky coloured by perpetual evening. Leaves move gently despite the absence of strong wind. Flowers cover the ground. Clear water runs through narrow channels. And at the centre stands the tree. Its branches bend beneath golden fruit. These are not merely valuable apples. They belong to Hera. They are tied to the marriage of Zeus and Hera, planted from a gift of Gaia and guarded within a sacred enclosure. To take them is not theft from a mortal king. It is intrusion into divine property. You remember the Lernaean Hind. Hercules once faced Artemis because he touched something sacred to her. Now he must take something belonging to the goddess who has hated him since infancy. If Hera wanted an excuse to destroy him, this would seem to provide one. Then something moves beneath the branches. At first it resembles a thick root. It coils around the trunk. A head rises. Ladon, the dragon guarding the apples. Ancient descriptions differ dramatically. Some give Ladon many heads, perhaps even 100, each capable of producing a different voice. Other representations show a single enormous serpent winding around the tree. Surviving Greek vase paintings preserve versions of this scene, sometimes showing the serpent beside the Hesperides and the sacred fruit. The image appears peaceful in some works, almost ceremonial. That raises another mystery. Was Ladon always imagined as a violent monster Hercules needed to kill? Or did different traditions understand the garden labour in different ways? The surviving story suggests both possibilities. In one major version, Hercules kills Ladon with an arrow. The Hydra's poison reaches even this sacred garden. An arrow flies. The dragon dies. Later tradition says Hera places Ladon among the stars as the constellation Draco. Once again, a creature defeated by Hercules escapes mortality through celestial memory. The crab at Lerna became Cancer. Now the dragon may become Draco. Hera cannot always save her creatures from Hercules, but she can preserve them in heaven. Another version of the labour unfolds differently. Hercules does not take the apples himself. Atlas does. And as Hercules studies the garden, the Titan's presence begins to make sense. Atlas may have a relationship with the Hesperides, sometimes described as their father. He can enter where Hercules cannot. He can obtain the fruit without the same violation, but Atlas carries the sky. He cannot simply walk away unless someone takes his burden. The possibility hangs silently between them. Hercules looks upward. The heavens stretch from horizon to horizon. You remember the trials behind him. The lion's skin across his shoulders. The Hydra poison upon his arrows. The patience learned from the hind. The strategy used against the boar. The redirected rivers. Athena's bronze clappers. The controlled bull. The mares. The tragedy of Hippolyta. The red cattle brought from beyond the pillars. Every labour has demanded something different. Now the task may require him to do something no mortal body was created to do. Carry heaven. Atlas explains the exchange. He will retrieve the apples. Hercules must hold the sky. There is a warning in the Titan's voice. Once the burden is taken, it cannot simply be dropped. Sky and earth must remain separated. Hercules looks again toward the golden fruit. 3 apples, in many tellings, small objects compared with everything he has crossed to reach them. How strange that such a long journey should end with something that could fit into 2 hands. But myths understand that value is rarely measured by size. A single fruit can contain a divine prohibition. A single promise can destroy a kingdom. A single arrow can carry the poison of a dead Hydra across years. Night settles fully. The garden glows beneath the stars. Ladon watches from the tree in the traditions where the dragon still lives. The Hesperides move somewhere among the branches like figures from a dream, and Atlas waits. Hercules steps closer. He removes the lion skin. For perhaps the first time in many journeys, the armour of Nemea will not help him. No hide can protect against weight. He places his feet firmly upon the ground. Atlas begins shifting the heavens. The movement is slow. The air itself seems to tremble. Hercules raises his arms. Then the burden touches him. For an instant, everything disappears beneath pressure. Mountains, garden, dragon, apples. There is only weight. The weight of stars. The weight of night. The weight of a cosmos that must not fall. Hercules bends but doesn't collapse. Atlas straightens. For the first time in an age, the Titan stands free. He looks toward the garden, and then he begins to walk. You remain beside Hercules beneath the turning heavens. Atlas grows smaller in the distance. The golden garden waits beyond him, and a troubling question enters the silence. After carrying the sky for so long, why would Atlas ever willingly return? You remain beside Hercules beneath the impossible weight of the sky. Atlas is walking away. For the first time in ages, the Titan's shoulders are free. His footsteps carry him toward the garden of the Hesperides, while Hercules stands where Atlas once stood. Arms raised, knees slightly bent, every muscle resisting a burden no mortal body was meant to support. Above you, the stars turn. The sight should be beautiful. Instead, it feels heavy. You can almost imagine Hercules becoming aware of every constellation at once. The Great Bear circles. Orion crosses the darkness. Draco winds through the northern sky. Perhaps somewhere among those stars lies the dragon Ladon. If you follow the tradition in which Hera eventually places him there, the heavens that guided sailors now press against Hercules' shoulders. He cannot step away. He cannot rest. He cannot even lower his arms. A strange thought comes to him. Atlas has endured this for ages. Suddenly the Titan seems less like a defeated enemy of Zeus and more like a prisoner. Greek mythology is filled with punishments that do not end. Prometheus chained to the rock, Sisyphus pushing his stone, Tantalus reaching forever for food and water, Atlas holding heaven. Immortality does not always mean freedom from death. Sometimes it means the inability to escape suffering through death. The realization gives this labor a melancholy unlike the earlier battles. The Nemean Lion could die. The Hydra could be buried. Geryon could fall. Atlas must continue. Time passes. Hercules cannot know how long. Then he hears footsteps. Atlas returns. In his hands are the golden apples. Even beneath starlight, they seem to carry their own faint glow. The Titan has succeeded. The labor should now be nearly finished. But Atlas does not move back beneath the sky. Instead, he looks at Hercules, then at the freedom surrounding him. He has walked without carrying heaven. Perhaps he has felt wind against shoulders that had forgotten what wind felt like. Perhaps he has looked toward distant mountains and understood that. For the first time in centuries, he could simply continue walking. Atlas makes an offer. He will carry the apples to Eurystheus himself. Hercules can remain here, holding the sky. The meaning is obvious. Atlas does not intend to return. The warning Hercules sensed before accepting the burden has become real. Now he faces a challenge no club can solve. If he releases the heavens, catastrophe follows. If he remains, his labors never end. Strength has trapped him. Only intelligence can release him. And Hercules has spent years learning intelligence. You remember the river channels at Augeas' stables, the deep snow used against the boar, the bronze clappers that drove the Stymphalian birds from cover. The lesson has repeated itself until even the strongest hero understands it. A direct attack is not always the answer, so Hercules agrees, calmly. He tells Atlas that carrying the apples to Eurystheus is an excellent idea, but there is one small problem. The weight of heaven is pressing painfully against his shoulders. Would Atlas hold it for only a moment while Hercules adjusts the lion skin as padding? The request sounds reasonable. Atlas has carried the burden for ages. What difference can another moment make? The Titan agrees. He places the apples down, then he steps beneath the heavens. The transfer begins. Weight shifts from mortal shoulders back onto immortal ones. Atlas bends. Hercules straightens. And the instant he is free, he reaches for the apples. The deception becomes clear too late. Atlas is trapped again. You might wonder whether Hercules feels guilty. The myth rarely pauses to tell you. Atlas attempted to abandon him. Hercules answered, cunning with cunning. Yet as you imagine the Titan once more standing beneath the stars, it is difficult not to feel some sadness. For a few moments he remembered freedom. Now eternity has returned. Perhaps that is why this episode survives so powerfully. Hercules wins, but victory does not make the world fair. He takes the golden apples. In another ancient version, the sequence is different. Hercules confronts Ladon directly, kills the dragon, and gathers the fruit himself. The coexistence of these traditions remind you again that Greek mythology was never a single book with one authorized storyline. Poets, painters, local cults, and oral storytellers inherited flexible traditions. One audience might hear of Atlas. Another might see Hercules and Ladon painted on pottery. Both recognized the labor. Both understood the sacred danger of the apples. Modern researchers continue to debate how the various versions developed. But perhaps the variation is part of what kept these myths alive. A story capable of changing can travel. Hercules begins the return journey. The apples seem strangely light after the heavens. He carries them carefully. They belong to Hera, and possession of divine objects is rarely permanent. Along the road, another warning comes through a dream. Hercules sees the apples placed on a stone floor before Eurystheus. The king reaches toward them. Before his fingers touch the fruit, an owl descends. Athena takes the apples. Then the garden appears again, restored exactly as before. Hercules wakes beneath the stars. The message seems clear. The apples may be his task. They will never truly be his property. Eventually Tiryns appears. After so many distant landscapes, its massive walls almost feel familiar. Eurystheus receives the golden fruit. The impossible has been done. Hercules found a garden no mortal could locate. He passed the dragon or overcame it, depending upon the tradition. He carried the heavens. He returned. But the apples cannot remain in the palace. Athena takes them and returns them to the Hesperides because sacred objects must return to their sacred order. The labor changes nothing about ownership. It changes Hercules. And now Eurystheus has almost reached the end of his commands. Only one task remains. The king has exhausted the surface of the world. Hercules has crossed mountains, marshes, islands, foreign kingdoms, and ocean itself. He has reached the western edge of mortal geography. Where can Eurystheus send him now? There is only one direction left. Down! The final command is spoken quietly. Descend into Hades. Bring back Cerberus, alive, the three-headed guardian of the dead. Hercules remembers the dream that has followed him since the labor of Geryon. 2 dogs, Orthrus behind him, Cerberus ahead. The road between them has finally reached its destination. That night, Hercules does not dream of monsters. He dreams of his family. They stand far away beyond a dark river. He tries to call to them. No sound comes. Then a gate appears. 3 heads rise before it, and somewhere beyond the gate, in the kingdom from which mortals do not return, a dog begins to growl. You remain in Tiryns only long enough to watch the golden apples leave mortal hands. Athena takes them. For a moment, the fruit seems almost unnaturally bright against the stone halls of Eurystheus's palace. Hercules has crossed the boundaries of the known world to obtain them, yet they cannot remain here. They belong to Hera's sacred garden, and sacred order demands their return. There is something quietly appropriate about this ending. Hercules has spent much of his life learning that completing a task does not mean possessing its reward. The Lernaean hind escaped back into the wilderness of Artemis. The Cretan bull was released. The cattle of Geryon were ultimately sacrificed. Now the apples vanish toward the divine garden from which they came. What remains with Hercules is experience and memory. You can almost imagine him looking at his empty hands. Once, those hands strangled the Nemean Lion. They held the Hydra's necks while Iolaus brought fire. They captured the golden hind without destroying it. They redirected rivers. They restrained bulls and horses. They carried the sky. Yet they cannot keep 3 small apples. Ancient Greek religion often emphasized the distance between mortal and divine possession. Humans might receive blessings from the gods, but attempting to hold what properly belonged to the divine realm could become an act of dangerous arrogance. The Greeks had a word closely associated with this danger: hubris, excessive pride, a failure to recognize limits. Hercules, for all his extraordinary power, has repeatedly been forced to discover limits. Perhaps that is one reason the golden apples matter. The strongest mortal reaches the garden of immortality and returns without immortality in his hands. At least, not yet. His own transformation still lies far ahead. Eurystheus summons him. You walk again through the massive stone passages of Tiryns. Torchlight trembles along the walls. The palace that once felt intimidating now seems almost small after Atlas and the western edge of the world. Eurystheus waits. Perhaps the king understands this too. What can he possibly command now? Hercules has overcome every earthly distance placed before him, so Eurystheus chooses a place beyond earthly distance. The underworld. The command is simple enough to say, "Bring Cerberus to me." Alive, no ordinary person could hear those words without understanding their impossibility. Cerberus belongs to Hades. He guards the boundary of death. His purpose is not merely to prevent intruders from entering. It is to prevent the dead from leaving. Ancient descriptions vary. The most familiar Cerberus has 3 heads. Hesiod gives him many more. Serpents may grow from his body. His tail may itself be a snake. Like the Hydra and Ladon, Cerberus belongs to the monstrous family associated with Typhon and Echidna, and like Orthrus, he is a hound. The dream Hercules has carried for so long becomes unmistakable. Orthrus stood at the western boundary. Cerberus waits at the final boundary. The first dog guarded cattle. The second guards the dead. Hercules leaves the palace. This time he does not immediately begin walking toward the destination. You cannot reach Hades by simply following a road. Different Greek traditions imagined entrances to the underworld in different places. Caves, deep chasms, remote lakes, places where the earth seemed to open downward. One important tradition sends Hercules to Taenarum, at the southern tip of the Peloponnese. There, a cave was believed to provide passage toward Hades, but before descending, Hercules requires preparation. Some traditions say he travels to Eleusis and seeks initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries. The sanctuary of Demeter and Persephone was among the most important religious centers of the Greek world. Initiates participated in secret rites connected with agriculture, death, renewal, and hopes concerning the afterlife. The details were guarded so carefully that even today much remains uncertain. Archaeology reveals the monumental sanctuary. Ancient authors testify to the mystery's importance, but the central rituals were not written down openly. That silence has survived for thousands of years. You approach Eleusis with Hercules near evening. Pilgrims walk the sacred road. Torches burn. The scent of grain, smoke, and sea air mingles beneath the darkening sky. Here the story slows. Hercules is preparing not for another hunt, but for death's territory. Some traditions suggest that because he had blood guilt upon him, special purification was required before initiation. Again, the original reason for the labors returns. Purification. Everything circles back. The monsters were never merely trophies. They belonged to a path begun after unbearable guilt. Inside the sacred tradition of Demeter and Persephone, Hercules learns what a mortal may learn before entering the realm below. You are not told the secret. Neither were uninitiated ancient audiences. That absence creates its own mystery. What knowledge did Hercules carry out of Eleusis? What did initiates believe they had seen? Historians continue to debate the experience, drawing cautiously from surviving texts, inscriptions, art, and archaeological evidence. The silence remains stronger than any reconstruction. When Hercules leaves Eleusis, he is ready, or as ready as anyone can be. That night he sleeps beneath a lion's skin. A dream comes. He sees the cave at Nemea, but instead of the lion waiting inside, the passage continues downward. The Hydra appears beside a black river. The golden hind crosses silently to the opposite shore. Pholus and Abderus stand among distant shadows. Hippolyta watches without speaking. Then his family appears. They are still beyond reach. A 3-headed dog stands between them. This time Hercules does not call out. He simply looks. One of Cerberus's heads opens its eyes. Then the second, Then the third. Hercules wakes before dawn. The air is cold. He begins travelling south. The landscape narrows toward Cape Tanarum. Mountains descend into the sea. Wind bends low vegetation. Waves strike cliffs beneath a grey sky. Eventually you reach the cave. Its entrance is dark enough to seem like an absence cut into the earth. Ancient visitors associated places like this with the unseen world, because caves naturally invite the imagination downward. Cold air moves from the opening. Hercules stands before it. There is no army beside him, no wheelhouse with fire, no atlas to negotiate with, no ship waiting to carry him across ocean, only the lion skin, his weapons, and whatever knowledge Eleusis has given him. Then divine help appears once more. Athena and Hermes are often associated with Hercules' descent. Hermes, guide of souls, knows the roads between worlds. If anyone can lead a living man among the dead, it is he. Hercules enters. Daylight shrinks behind you. Stone becomes cold beneath your feet. Water drips somewhere ahead. The sound echoes. You descend farther. And for the first time since the labours began, Hercules is travelling toward a monster that he cannot reach without first passing through the kingdom of death itself. You descend with Hercules until the daylight behind you becomes nothing more than a pale memory. The cave narrows. Cold stone presses close on either side, wet beneath Hercules' hands whenever he reaches out for the balance. The air smells of minerals, damp earth, and water that has never known sunlight. Hermes moves ahead. The god is strangely suited to this road. He crosses boundaries that hold ordinary beings apart. He travels between Olympus, the mortal world, and the kingdom below. He guides souls toward the dead. And tonight, he guides someone in the opposite condition. A living man walking voluntarily into Hades. Athena's protection remains with Hercules as well, though different traditions emphasize divine assistance in different ways. The descent itself matters more than precise geography. You are crossing a boundary. Ancient Greeks did not imagine death as a single simple experience. Their traditions about the afterlife developed and changed across centuries. Homeric poetry offers one vision of the dead. Mystery religions, philosophical traditions, local cults, and later poets offer others. Yet one image remains deeply persistent. A journey downward. Eventually the narrow passage opens. Before you lies water. Black. Still. A river seems to cross the darkness. Perhaps it is the Styx, perhaps the Acheron. Ancient descriptions of the underworld contain several rivers, and storytellers do not always arrange them identically. Their names carry meanings of grief, lamentation, fire, forgetfulness, and hatred. Death becomes geography. At the bank waits a boat, and beside it stands Charon, the ferryman. He carries the dead across the water. Ordinary souls arrive with no strength capable of changing their condition. In later Greek funerary practice, coins could be placed with the deceased and became associated with payment for Charon. Though customs and interpretations varied, Hercules approaches. Charon looks at him. A living man does not belong here. The ferryman hesitates. Some traditions say Hercules frightens him into providing passage. Others allow divine authority to open the way. However it happens, you enter the boat. Wood shifts beneath your weight. Charon pushes away from the bank. No birds call. No wind moves through leaves. There are no leaves, only the soft movement of dark water against the hull. Shapes become visible on the opposite shore. The dead. They gather like shadows. Some retreat when they see Hercules. Perhaps the lion skin makes him resemble another monster entering their world. Perhaps they simply remember the strength of life. Then Hercules recognizes faces. The dead are not an abstraction anymore. They are people. In some traditions he encounters Meleager, the famous hero of the Caledonian boar hunt. Meleager tells him of his sister Deianira and asks Hercules to marry her. It is a strange conversation to hold in the kingdom of the dead. Yet the request becomes another prophecy. Deianira will indeed enter Hercules' life, and through her, years later, the poison of the Hydra will return one final time. Hercules does not know this. You do. The arrowheads prepared in Lerna still cast their shadow forward. The journey continues. Another figure appears. Medusa, or perhaps only her shade. Hercules instinctively reaches for his weapon. Hermes stops him. There is nothing to fight. The dead cannot be killed again. It is a simple lesson, but an important one. Hercules has entered a realm where strength loses much of its familiar meaning. You cannot defeat death by striking it. Farther on, Hercules finds Theseus and Pirithous. Their presence is another warning about entering divine realms without permission. According to myth, the two heroes descended into Hades with an outrageous plan. They intended to abduct Persephone herself. They sat upon a supernatural seat and became trapped. Hercules attempts to rescue them. He succeeds in freeing Theseus. But when he tries to release Pirithous, the earth trembles. A divine sign. Enough. Some boundaries will not yield. Hercules understands. He leaves Pirithous behind. The moment is another quiet measure of how far he has changed. The younger Hercules might have responded to resistance by pulling harder. This Hercules recognizes a warning. He continues. The road descends toward the palace of Hades. You begin to see a distant glow. Not sunlight. Torchlight. Dark columns rise from the gloom. The palace of the king and queen of the dead stands ahead. Here rule Hades and Persephone. Hades is not the Greek equivalent of a devil. Ancient Greek religion does not divide the divine world so simply. He is stern, feared, and inexorable, but he is a legitimate god and ruler. His kingdom exists because mortality exists. Every mortal eventually becomes his subject, except, perhaps for a little while longer, Hercules. The hero enters the hall. You can imagine cold stone beneath his feet. Sacred fires burn without warming the enormous chamber. Persephone sits beside Hades, a queen belonging simultaneously to the worlds of death and returning life. Hercules does not attack. He asks permission. This matters. After so many labors involving seizure, combat, and pursuit, the final monster cannot simply be stolen. Hercules explains Eurystheus' command. He must take Cerberus to the upper world and return him afterward. Hades listens. Then he agrees. But there is a condition. Hercules must subdue Cerberus without using ordinary weapons. No sword, no arrows. The Hydra's poison will not solve this labor. The condition returns Hercules to the beginning. Nemean, a cave, an invulnerable lion, bare hands. The circle is closing. Hades gives another warning. Cerberus belongs to the boundary itself. He may be taken temporarily, but he must return. Just as the golden hind belonged to Artemis, and the apples belonged to Hera. The guardian of death cannot become a mortal possession. Hercules accepts. Then you hear something beyond the palace. A growl. Low. Deep. Another answers from slightly higher. Then a third. Hercules becomes still. The dream has finally become real. Orthrus is behind him now, dead beneath the western sunset. Ahead waits Orthrus's brother. 3 heads emerge from the darkness. Serpents twist around the creature's body in some traditions. Its claws scrape against the stone. Cerberus has guarded this gate against countless dead souls. But tonight something unprecedented stands before him. A living man who intends to take the guardian of death back beneath the sun. Hercules removes his weapons. He places the bow aside. The poisoned arrows touch the stone. His sword follows. Only the Nemean Lion skin remains around him, the trophy from the first labor, the protection carried through nearly every road since. Cerberus lowers 3 heads, the growling deepens, and Hercules walks forward with empty hands. You follow Hercules away from the shadowed palace of Hades and toward the place where Cerberus guards the boundary of the dead. The sound of the 3-headed hound moves through the darkness before you can clearly see him again. One growl becomes 3. They overlap in different tones, low enough to seem almost part of the earth itself. Hercules walks without his bow, without his sword, without the poisoned arrows that have followed him since Lerna. Hades has made the condition unmistakable. Cerberus must be subdued without weapons. The command brings Hercules back toward the simplest form of his power, his own body. Yet before he reaches the guardian, the road curves through deeper regions of the underworld. The dead remain around you. Some appear only as distant shadows. Others become recognizable for a moment before fading again into the gloom. You begin to understand why ancient descriptions of Hades often feel less like scenes of constant torture and more like landscapes of separation. The sorrow is not always pain. Sometimes it is distance, a voice you remember but cannot reach, a face appearing beyond dark water, a life continuing somewhere above while you remain below. Hercules sees warriors, kings, women carrying memories of houses that no longer exist. People once feared and admired now move through the same kingdom. Death has made their earthly distinction strangely small. This would have carried powerful meaning for ancient listeners. A wealthy ruler could build monuments. A warrior could win fame. A poet could preserve a name. But mortality remained the one law even kings could not repeal. Hercules knows that law better than most. His family waits somewhere within this realm. The thought follows him. Then a figure appears near the path, Meleager again. In traditions that place their meeting during this stage of the descent, his shade speaks calmly. The hero who once fought the Caledonian boar is now beyond every earthly contest. He tells Hercules about Deianira, his sister. He asks the living hero to remember her when he returns above. Hercules promises. A promise made among the dead carries a peculiar weight. You have seen promises repeatedly shape the labours. Glaucus waiting at Nemea, Olga's refusing his agreement, Minos withholding Poseidon's sacrifice, Hippolyta's peaceful exchange destroyed by suspicion. Now Hercules himself gives his word. He will remember Deianira. He cannot know that she will become part of the final chapter of his mortal life. The Hydra's poison waits there too. Greek mythology often makes destiny feel less like a straight road than a web. A choice made years earlier remains connected to an event not yet visible. You continue. The road passes a dark pool. The surface does not move. For an instant, Hercules sees reflections within it, not his present face. The infant strangling Hera's serpents. The young man whose anger killed Linus. The husband and father before madness destroyed his home. The warrior entering the Nemean cave. The traveller carrying heaven. Are these visions real? A divine sign? Or simply memories rising in a place where the dead surround him? No ancient storyteller can answer for you. Hercules turns away. Farther ahead stands Theseus. If you follow the tradition placing the rescue here, he remains trapped upon the supernatural seat that bound him after the reckless attempt to seize Persephone. Hercules grips him. He pulls. The earth seems unwilling to release the imprisoned hero. Hercules pulls harder. At last Theseus comes free, but part of him seems almost left behind. And later, comic traditions even explain physical features of Athenians through this strange rescue. Then Hercules reaches toward Pirith House. Immediately the ground trembles. Dust falls. A deep sound moves through the earth. The warning is unmistakable. Do not continue. Hercules stops. Once, he might have treated the trembling earth as another opponent. Now he understands the difference between courage and defiance. Not every boundary exists to be broken. Some must be respected. You leave Pirith House. There is sadness in that decision, but maturity sometimes means accepting that you cannot save everyone. Even Hercules, especially Hercules. Soon you hear Cerberus again. The path broadens. Before you stands a gate. Beyond it lies the road toward the upper world. Cerberus occupies the space before it. Now you see the Guardian clearly. 3 enormous canine heads rise above a powerful body. In some traditions, serpents coil from his neck and back. His tail ends in another serpent. Sliver falls from his jaws onto the stone. Yet Cerberus is not evil. This matters. He performs his duty. He guards the order separating life and death. To the dead who wish to escape, he is terrifying. To the cosmos, he is necessary. That makes him unlike many earlier monsters. The Nemean Lion devastated communities. The Hydra poisoned Lerna. Diomedes' mares had been trained to consume people. Cerberus is simply where he belongs. Hercules is the intruder. Perhaps the final labour therefore asks the deepest question of all. Can you overcome something without pretending it deserves destruction? Hercules removes the last objects that might be considered weapons. He adjusts the lion skin around his shoulders. The old armour suddenly feels significant. The first monster will protect him against the last. A circle formed across years of wandering. Cerberus watches. One head focuses on Hercules' hands, another seems to watch his face, the third turns toward the road behind him. As though unwilling to neglect the dead even for a moment, then comes an omen, from somewhere beyond the gate, impossibly faint. Hercules hears birdsong, the upper world. Morning may be beginning far above. Cerberus hears it too. One head lifts. For a heartbeat the growling stops. Hercules moves closer. He does not rush. The golden hind taught patience. The bull taught control. Atlas taught cunning. The trembling earth taught restraint. Every labor seems to stand beside him now. Cerberus suddenly lunges. Hercules catches one neck. Another head snaps toward his shoulder, but its teeth meet the Nemean hide. The lion protects him. Serpents twist around his legs. He holds tighter. Cerberus thrashes. The gate echoes with the struggle. But Hercules does not reach for a blade. He cannot, and perhaps he no longer wants to. This final monster is not meant to die. It must be mastered and returned. Slowly, Hercules shifts his grip. His arms tighten around the guardian. The three heads roar into the darkness, and somewhere beyond them lies a road no dead soul is permitted to walk. A road upward, toward air, toward sunlight, toward Eurystheus. For the first time since entering Hades, Hercules can almost feel the warmth of the living world waiting above. But first, Cerberus must yield. You remain beside Hercules at the gate of the dead while Cerberus struggles within his arms. Three heads twist in different directions. One snaps at the lion skin covering Hercules' shoulder. Another throws itself backward, trying to break his grip. The third releases a deep howl that travels through the stone passages of Hades until the sound seems to come from the earth itself. Serpents coil around Hercules' legs. Their scales slide across his skin. Yet he does not release the hound. There is something almost familiar about this struggle. Long ago, inside the cave at Nemea, Hercules discovered that arrows and swords could not defeat the lion. He had wrapped his arms around the creature and trusted the strength of his own body. Now, at the opposite end of his labors, he does almost the same thing. But one essential detail has changed. The lion had to die. Cerberus must live. Hercules tightens his hold without crushing the guardian. That requires a different kind of strength. Controlled strength. Perhaps this is the transformation hidden beneath the entire cycle. The man whose uncontrolled power once destroyed what he loved has spent years learning how much force to use and when not to use it. Cerberus struggles again. The lion's skin holds against his teeth. The first labor continues protecting Hercules during the last. You can almost imagine the memories moving through him. The cave, the marsh, the golden hind disappearing between trees, snow around the Erymanthian boar, river water roaring through the stables of Augeas, bronze clappers echoing over Stymphalus, the Cretan bull beneath the moon, Abderus lost beside the mares, Hippolyta on the distant shore, Geryon beneath the western sunset, Atlas returning beneath the heavens. Every road has led here. Cerberus begins to tire. His movements become slower. Hercules does not loosen his grip immediately. He waits. Patience, another lesson learned far from this place. Finally the great hound becomes still. Not defeated in death, subdued, Hercules releases some of the pressure. Cerberus remains beneath his control. The impossible has happened. A living man has mastered the guardian of the dead without a weapon. Somewhere behind you. Hades knows that Hercules has fulfilled the condition. The god does not interfere. The agreement stands. Cerberus may be taken temporarily into the upper world. Temporarily. That warning matters. Nothing belonging to death can simply be carried away forever. Hercules begins the ascent. Cerberus follows unwillingly. You leave the gate. The palace fades behind you. The shadows of the dead gather at a distance. Perhaps they understand what they are witnessing. Their guardian is leaving. For a moment the boundary seems vulnerable, but none follows. Death has rules deeper than any single monster. You pass again through the regions Hercules crossed on the way down. The dark water appears. Charon waits. Ancient versions do not give you a single detailed itinerary for the return, and some traditions place Hercules' emergence at different locations. Taenarum, Trusa, Other places claimed connections with the hero's descent. Sacred geography grows wherever communities attach their landscape to myth. But the emotional direction never changes, upward. You begin to notice differences in the air. At first they are almost impossible to identify. Then you realize what has changed. Wind. A faint current moves through the passage. Cerberus raises his heads. He has never belonged to the world above. Farther ahead, darkness becomes grey. The smell of wet stone begins mixing with something else. Vegetation. Earth warmed by sunlight. The living world is close. Hercules continues. Then daylight appears. Cerberus stops. All three heads recoil. The brightness must be overwhelming to a creature raised beneath the earth. Hercules pulls gently but firmly. The hound moves forward, and Cerberus emerges beneath the sky. For perhaps the first time, sunlight touches the guardian of Hades. Later traditions claim that poisonous plants spring from the ground where foam or saliva falls from Cerberus's mouths. The toxic plant aconite, or wolfsbane, becomes associated with this strange moment. Whether the botanical connection is early or later, the image is perfectly mythological. Something from the underworld touches living soil. Poison grows. Cerberus looks around. Wind moves through grass. Birds call. Clouds cross an open sky. You have travelled with Hercules through extraordinary landscapes, yet ordinary daylight now feels almost miraculous. Perhaps that is one of the quiet gifts of underworld stories. They make the familiar world seem precious again. Warmth, wind, trees, the smell of smoke from a distant house, a human voice. Things unnoticed until you imagine losing them. Hercules turns toward Tiryns. The journey's not finished until Eurystheus sees the guardian. Travellers flee when they encounter Hercules and Cerberus on the road. You cannot blame them. The lion's skin alone identifies a frightening figure. Beside him walks the three-headed dog of death. Rumours race ahead. By the time Hercules approaches the palace, Eurystheus knows what is coming. The king who once hid from the Erymanthian boar now faces something far worse. Cerberus enters the space before Tiryns. Three heads turn toward the unfamiliar city. Servants scatter. Guards retreat. And Eurystheus sees the creature he believed no living man could bring back. Ancient comedy enters the myth once again. Some traditions describe the terrified king hiding inside his great bronze storage jar. The image has an almost perfect symmetry. Eurystheus designed the impossible command. Now the impossible result stands outside his palace. Perhaps Hercules says very little. He does not need to boast. Cerberus is proof enough. The final labour is complete. The rejected Hydra and Augean tasks no longer matter. The number has reached 12. Hercules has obeyed. He has crossed the world. He has entered death. And he has returned. But one obligation remains. Hades gave permission under a condition. Cerberus must come home. Hercules does not allow Eurystheus to keep the hound. He turns back toward the road below. This detail separates the final labour from simple conquest. Cerberus is not a trophy. He belongs to Hades. Eventually Hercules returns him to the underworld. The guardian resumes his place. The boundary closes, and the strange disruption ends. Yet as Hercules returns alone beneath the open sky, you may feel something has changed more deeply than any royal command can measure. The prophecy that began his service has been fulfilled. The monsters are behind him, but purification is harder to measure. Can 12 labours erase grief? Can courage undo the past? Can a man return from the kingdom of death and become the person he was before? Greek mythology does not offer such an easy promise. Hercules still carries the lion skin, he still carries memories, and somewhere among them remains the image of his family beyond the dark river. That evening he rests beneath an olive tree. Sunset fades. The first stars appear. For years, the road ahead has always contained another command. Tonight there is none. Hercules looks toward the sky, and for the first time since Delphi, the next step belongs to him. You wake beneath the olive tree to a world that asks nothing of Hercules. No herald waits with another command. No frightened king has invented another impossible destination. No monster waits at the end of a road chosen by Eurystheus. Morning simply arrives. Sunlight moves across the grass. Birds call from the branches. Somewhere beyond the hills, a farmer begins another ordinary day. After the darkness of Hades, these small sounds feel almost sacred. Hercules rises. For years, his life has been organized by obligation. Nemean, Lerna, Arcadia, Elis, Stymphalus, Crete, Thrace, the distant lands of the Amazons, the western island of Geryon, the garden of the Hesperides, the underworld. Now there is no next labor, but freedom brings its own uncertainty. Who are you when the punishment that defined your life finally ends? The question follows Hercules away from Tiryns. Ancient tradition does not allow his story to stop here. Many adventures still lie ahead. He will become involved in wars, marriages, acts of vengeance, friendships, and further tragedies. The 12 Labors are only one great cycle within a much larger heroic life. Yet something has changed. The man leaving Eurystheus is not the same man who first approached the palace after Delphi. You can see the transformation most clearly by remembering the monsters. The Nemean Lion taught Hercules that ordinary weapons could fail. The Hydra taught him that some dangers multiply when attacked without thought. The Lernaean Hind demanded patience. The Erymanthian boar required control. The Augean stables rewarded intelligence rather than force. The Stymphalian birds were defeated through strategy and divine assistance. The Cretan bull had to be mastered without being killed. The mares of Diomedes revealed how cruelty can transform even familiar creatures into horrors. Hippolyta's tragedy showed how suspicion could create violence where none had been necessary. Geryon carried Hercules to the boundary of the known world. Atlas forced him to survive through cunning. Cerberus demanded strength restrained by respect. Perhaps the 12 monsters were never merely 12 monsters. Some were animals, some were supernatural beings, some were kings, some were situations, and some of the greatest dangers lived inside Hercules himself. Ancient audiences would have recognized this tension. Heracles was enormously popular across the Greek world precisely because he could represent contradictory things at once. He was powerful and vulnerable, divine and mortal, civilized and wild, protector and destroyer, a man capable of terrible mistakes who nevertheless continued struggling toward purification. Sanctuaries dedicated to him appeared across Greek communities. Some worship treated him as a hero. Other traditions honored him as a god. The boundary between the two identities became part of his mystery. Archaeological evidence preserves his image almost everywhere. You find him on painted pottery, in temple sculpture, en coin, in mosaics. Sometimes the artist needs almost nothing to identify him. A club, a lion's skin. Those two objects are enough. The lion remains especially important. You remember the first cave? The young Hercules entered with weapons and discovered that none could penetrate the beast. He emerged wearing the monster. Years later, that same skin protected him against Cerberus. The beginning literally travelled with him to the end. Perhaps this is why the image feels so enduring. Hercules does not erase his trials. He carries them. The things that nearly destroyed him become part of the figure history remembers. Yet another object travels with him too. The poisoned arrows. Their presence is darker. The Hydra is dead, but its venom survives. You have already seen what it did to Chiron, and the warning has not finished unfolding. The shade of Meleager spoke of Deianira in Hades. Hercules promised to remember her. He will. In later myth, Hercules marries Deianira, and eventually another centaur, Nessus, enters their story. Nessus attempts to violate or abduct Deianira, and Hercules shoots him with one of the Hydra-poisoned arrows. As Nessus dies, he deceives Deianira. He tells her that his blood can be used as a love charm. Years later, fearing that Hercules' affection has turned elsewhere, Deianira uses the substance on a garment. She does not understand that the blood has been contaminated by the Hydra's poison. Hercules puts on the garment. The poison burns into him, and so the creature defeated during the second labor reaches across years to contribute to the hero's mortal end. The callback is almost unbearably precise. Hercules killed the Hydra, but he carried part of it with him. The weapon he created from victory became the instrument of his suffering. Was this destiny? A curse? Or simply the consequence of a decision made long before? Ancient storytellers leave room for all three. And perhaps that uncertainty is part of the myth's power. You cannot always see the final meaning of what you carry. Still, Hercules' death will not be an ordinary ending. Tradition tells of the funeral pyre on Mount Aeta. The mortal part of Hercules burns away. Then Zeus receives his son among the gods. Hera, astonishingly, is finally reconciled with him in the divine order. The goddess whose hatred shaped his entire mortal life becomes part of the resolution of his immortality. Some traditions even give Hercules Hebe, Hera's daughter and goddess of youth, as his divine wife. The circle closes in a way the suffering mortal Hercules could never have predicted. You imagine him now before those final events, still alive, still walking. The evening sun lowers across Greece. Smoke rises from distant settlements. Temple columns catch the last golden light. Somewhere a storyteller may already be repeating the tale of the Nemean Lion. Elsewhere, an artisan paints Hercules fighting the Hydra onto a clay vessel. Myth is beginning to separate from the man. That happens to heroes. Their suffering becomes an image. Their fear becomes entertainment. Their complicated lives become symbols simple enough to paint on pottery. But if you have walked beside Hercules through the entire road, you remember what lies behind the lion skin. A grieving father, a man frightened by what his own strength could do, someone who entered the labours not because he believed himself invincible, but because he needed a way to continue living after catastrophe. That may be the deepest transformation. At the beginning, Hercules needed the oracle to tell him where to go. Now he walks beneath the evening sky without an order. The stars emerge. Cancer shines somewhere above, remembering Hera's crab. Draco winds across the northern heavens, recalling Ladon. Constellations turn slowly over the same Mediterranean landscapes where generations will continue telling these stories. Hercules looks upward. Perhaps he remembers Atlas beneath that enormous sky. Perhaps he wonders whether mortals, too, carry invisible heavens upon their shoulders. Then a distant temple bell or bronze instrument sounds through the dusk. The road ahead darkens, and you follow the hero toward the final quiet question of his story. Not whether Hercules defeated the monsters, but why, after thousands of years, you still remember them. You follow Hercules a little farther beneath the evening sky. There is no monster ahead now, no king waiting behind cyclopean walls, no oracle demanding another journey, only a road crossing the quiet Greek countryside while the last sunlight fades from the hills. Olive trees become dark silhouettes. A shepherd leads his animals home. Smoke rises from cooking fires, carrying the faint scent of burning wood and herbs across the cooling air. Above you the first stars appear, and perhaps this is the right place to understand what the labours have become. They began as punishment. They became legend, long after the imagined age of Hercules had passed. Greek children could hear these stories from parents and storytellers. Adults could encounter them at festivals and sanctuaries. Travellers could recognise episodes painted on pottery or carved into temple stone. The monsters became part of cultural memory, and each could mean more than the creature itself. The Nemean Lion waited where ordinary weapons failed. The Hydra multiplied when attacked incorrectly. The Golden Hind could be captured only through restraint. The boar demanded patience and understanding of the landscape. The Stymphalian birds required intelligence before force. The Cretan bull carried the consequences of a broken promise. The mares of Diomedes revealed what cruelty could create, and the later labours carried Hercules beyond ordinary monsters towards stranger boundaries. Hippolyta showed how mistrust could transform peace into tragedy. Geryon waited at the edge of geography. Ladon guarded divine property. Atlas carried an unbearable responsibility. Cerberus guarded the boundary no mortal could normally cross twice. Perhaps this is why the traditional phrase 12 Labors is ultimately more accurate than 12 monsters. Not every opponent was a monster, and sometimes the creature that appeared monstrous was simply performing the role assigned to it. Cerberus guarded the dead. The Lernaean Hind belonged to Artemis. The Cretan bull had been caught inside the consequences of Minos's broken vow. Even Geryon, viewed from another angle, defended cattle Hercules had come to take. Greek mythology rarely offers a world divided cleanly between heroes and villains. It gives you something older and more complicated. Gods can behave unjustly. Heroes can make terrible mistakes, monsters can possess understandable purposes, kings can become more frightening than beasts, and destiny can place everyone inside conflicts they didn't create. Hercules himself embodies these contradictions. You have seen his strength, but strength alone never explains why his story survived. A perfectly virtuous Hercules would be less memorable. A Hercules who never lost control, never suffered, never regretted, and never needed forgiveness would have little reason to undertake the labours at all. His greatness exists beside his flaws. Perhaps ancient audiences understood something deeply human in that arrangement. A life does not need to be spotless to contain courage. A terrible past does not prevent the future from demanding difficult acts of endurance. Yet the myth never pretends that achievement simply erases what happened. Hercules completes the labours. His family remains dead. Pholus remains dead. Abderus remains dead. Hippolyta cannot be restored by another heroic victory. Purification is not the same as forgetting. You continue walking. The moon rises. Its pale light settles across the road. Far away, marble sanctuaries shine faintly beneath the night. You can imagine generations passing around them. Empires rise. Empires disappear. The Greek city-states lose their independence. Rome absorbs Greek mythology and carries Hercules under the Latin form of his name across an even wider world. Temples fall, languages change, statues break, paint fades, libraries burn. Still the hero survives. You find him centuries later in Renaissance paintings, in sculpture, in opera, in poetry. In modern films and novels, each age reshapes him. Sometimes he becomes a symbol of physical strength, sometimes endurance, sometimes conquest, sometimes the burden of heroic identity itself. But behind all those later versions, the old road remains. A grieving man goes to Delphi. An oracle sends him to Eurystheus. A lion waits in a cave. That beginning is enough to set everything else in motion. You remember the infant too. 2 serpents moved toward his cradle. Hera's warning began before Hercules could understand hatred. At the end of his mortal life, according to tradition, Hera's hostility finally loses its power. The poisoned garment brings unbearable suffering. Hercules prepares his own funeral pyre on Mount Yeta. The hero who survived monsters discovers that mortality cannot ultimately be strangled or outwitted. Even Hercules must die. But mythology refuses to leave him entirely among the dead. As the pyre burns, his mortal element is consumed. Zeus receives his immortal nature on Olympus. The transformation that the oracle's promise once hinted toward is finally completed. Hercules becomes divine. And there, in one of mythology's most surprising reconciliations, Hera is no longer his enemy. The hostility that began with serpents in the cradle ends among the gods. He marries Hebe, goddess of youth and daughter of Hera. What began as divine resentment closes with divine acceptance. Whether every ancient Greek understood the story in precisely this way is impossible to say. Religious traditions varied from place to place and century to century. Some communities emphasized Hercules the hero. Others worshipped Heracles as a god. Surviving evidence indicates that both identities could exist side by side. Perhaps that is fitting. Hercules always belonged between categories: mortal and divine, civilized and wild, destroyer and protector, sinner and purified hero, man and legend. And now, as the night deepens, you can allow the ancient world to become quieter. The road's empty. The marketplaces have closed. Ships rest against harbour walls while small waves move beneath them. Sacred fires burn lower inside distant sanctuaries. Wind passes gently through cypress branches. Somewhere in the mountains, a cave stands empty. The Nemean Lion has been gone for thousands of imagined years. The marsh at Lerna is still. No Hydra rises from the reeds. The golden hind has disappeared into Artemis's forest. The Erymanthian snow holds no monstrous tracks. Lake Stymphalus reflects the stars. Crete sleeps beneath the moon. The red cattle of Geryon have vanished into story. The Hesperides still guard their gardens somewhere beyond the edge of ordinary maps. And beneath the earth, Cerberus has returned to his gate, 3 heads resting in the darkness, watching, waiting. The monsters have become memories. And perhaps that is where all monsters eventually go, into stories, into paintings, into names beneath museum glass, into constellations above sleeping cities. You can let Hercules walk ahead of you now. The lion skin rests across his shoulders. His club touches the dusty road. He grows smaller beneath the stars. There is nothing more you need to follow. You have crossed the mountains and marshes with him. You have sailed the dark sea. You have stood at the western edge of the world. You have entered the garden of the gods and walked beneath the earth. And now the journey can finally become still. The stars turn slowly overhead, just as they did above ancient Greece. The night air is cool. The road is quiet. The distant sea keeps its gentle rhythm against the shore. Whatever burdens you carried into this story can remain beside the road for a little while. The labours are finished. The gates are closed. The sacred fires are fading. And Hercules, somewhere far beyond the moonlit hills, has already become a legend. So you can rest here beneath the old and patient sky, listening to the wind, listening to the sea, and allowing the ancient world slowly and peacefully to disappear into sleep